LoveLore Library. Chapter 454. We've only been in the capital for a month or so, and we're guests from another country, so we don't dare to run around. We're only thinking about rescuing Miss, so where would we find the time to inquire about some strange news? What we know is from the Vice Envoy's orders. We really don't know anything else. Miss, your body is not well yet. This servant will wait for you to drink some soup and rest. We'll be leaving the city in a bit. Pangue lifted a corner of the curtain and waved his hand at a mute girl who was following silently outside. That mute girl respectfully brought in the box with the soup in her arms. Ning Shu had many doubts. Originally, she did not plan on drinking the soup. But when the wooden box was opened and she smelled the sweet fragrance, she couldn't help but take a tentative sip. Because the fragrance was strangely familiar. It was like when she was a child, she really acted coquettishly in front of her mother, begging her mother to make her a bowl of sweet soup. "Mother, mother, I want to drink the sweet soup you made. Just one sip and I'll be fine." Her mother held her in her arms and rocked her gently. She kissed her forehead and comforted in a soft voice, "Good, good, good. You little greedy cat, mother will make it for you. My little greedy cat, you have to get better quickly after drinking the soup." Pangue's voice seemed to have some kind of magic. Combined with her burning eyes, they formed two bottomless black holes. Her eyes blurred and her mind and soul were unconsciously sucked in. This is Miss's favorite sweet soup. Ever since Miss and Furen were separated, Furen has been cooking this soup every day. When the soup is cold, she will cook it again. When it's done, she will put it there and watch it gradually cool down. Day after day, year after year. Everyone in the Fu knows how to make this soup. Fourth Miss, Furen is waiting at home for you to return. Ning Shu's expression was dazed. "Mother is waiting for me." Pangue's hand floated in front of her eyes. His voice was slow and deep. "Yes, you're sleepy now. Close your eyes and sleep for a while. You'll see Furen soon." Her eyes slowly closed. Ning Shu sank back into chaos. When Pangue saw this, he exchanged glances with the mute girl and exhaled at the same time. Putting the bowl of soup back into the wooden box, Pangue said, "Young Miss is too clever. She caught me a few times. Fortunately, I have this bowl of soup. We have passed this hurdle. In the future, we have to be more careful. At the very least, we have to endure until we leave the Great Yu domain." The mute girl looked at Ning Shu anxiously, as if she had thousands of words to say, but she forced them down and pointed at herself. Pangue shook his head and said, "Better let me do it. You continue to stand guard outside. I'm afraid that your willpower isn't firm and instead spoil Madam's important matter. Don't worry, I'm here. I won't let anything happen to her." The long convoy finally arrived at the city gates. Xiao Yuni pulled the reins and stopped the horses. Deputy Envoy Tuoba Han said with a smile, "Thank you, Sixth Prince, for sending us all the way here on behalf of your country's monarch. The city gates are right in front. Even if you send us off for 1,000 miles, we still have to part. Sixth Prince, please stop. If Sixth Prince has the chance to visit my southern Yen in the future, this envoy will definitely welcome you." Xiao Yuni nodded politely. Envoy Tuoba is too polite. "This time, I'm bringing my Great Yu's princess back to the country through marriage. What I'm bringing back is not only my royal father's precious pearl, but also my Great Yu's 10,000 years of friendship. Please be sure to tell your country's monarch to treat the princess well. This prince is extremely grateful." "Ha ha ha, of course. It's my southern Yan's fortune to have this pearl. How can we wait? Sixth Prince, don't worry. It's getting late. We have to hurry on our way. Farewell, Your Highness." Tuoba Han waved his arm and the long convoy set off again, slowly driving out of the capital. The person sitting in the red carriage with red paint and red silk silently shed 2 streams of hot tears through the red veil in front of her. She solemnly bid farewell to Xiao Yini, and from now on, she would be separated from her homeland. Xiao Yini sat on the horse and watched the convoy pass by one, sending them off with his eyes. Beside him, the guard with a golden mask said softly, "Your Highness, His Majesty's mission has been completed. I'll escort you back to your residence." A crack finally appeared on Xiao Yuni's zombie-like face, revealing the red flesh inside. The red veins in his eyes floated up one by one, the veins on the back of his hand swelled up one by one, almost bursting. Something like that happened to her, but I couldn't even go and visit her immediately. Instead, I'm still here fulfilling the so-called Emperor's orders. You want me to go back to my residence now? Do you want me to not even see her for the last time? I've said too much. Please punish me, Your Highness. Xiao Yini raised his head and looked at the blue sky, his voice like a knife cutting into his heart. In the past, I always blamed her for not giving me a chance. I even dared to swear with my life. Why couldn't she believe me just once and believe that I was sincere to her? Only now did I know the reason. Her understanding of me was far too deep. The words weighing the pros and cons had long been carved into my bones. Even if I didn't like Imperial Father's marriage, I wouldn't reject it on the spot. That was because the eldest princess bloodline was extremely important to me in obtaining the throne. Even if I was in so much pain when I heard the news of her death and wanted to rush over to see her immediately, I still accepted Father's order with a smile. Because that was the trust Father had for his favorite son. Ambition and shrewdness, hypocrisy and ruthlessness. These 4 words are really the best description that God has for me. In this life, I'm destined not to be worthy of her. The guard was even more terrified and his knees hit the ground. Your Highness, you can't be so self-deprecating. He slowly looked away and exhaled a long and trembling breath. Get up. She won't be able to hear you anymore. Come with me to the Duke's residence. I want to see her for the last time. He turned his horse around and brushed past the last carriage that had fallen behind the caravan. As they brushed past each other, a gust of wind suddenly appeared out of nowhere and gently lifted a corner of the carriage's curtains. A strange feeling flashed past Xiao Yuni's heart and he instinctively stretched out his arm. Wait. Chapter 455. Tuoba Han, who had been riding at the front, turned his horse around when he heard the report. 6th Prince, what is it? Xiao Yuni pointed his horsewhip at the last carriage that was too quiet. I heard from the officials of the Ministry of Rights that the envoys from your country exchanged treasures with the 2 countries. Including the princess dowry, there should be a total of 36 carriages. Where did the 37th carriage come from and who is sitting inside? The vice envoy, Tuoba Han, glanced and said carelessly, that is the 4th miss of our Southern Yen silk merchants Bayou family. Her father and I are close friends, so when he came back this time, he asked me to bring her back. Because it is not official business, I did not report it. Why, does 6th Prince think there is something wrong with her? If 6th Prince is worried, you can check it. However, this child has a hard life and met with misfortune. She is injured and cannot come out to meet guests. I will have to trouble 6th Prince to board the carriage and take a look. Xiao Yuni glanced at Tuoba Han's careless expression and went forward to lift the corner of the curtain with his horsewhip. The mute girl's fingers immediately tightened. Fortunately, she worried too much. Because they were already prepared, the curtains of this carriage were specially chosen to be dark. Even though the sun was shining brightly outside and the sky was blue, the interior of the carriage was still a little dim. In addition, the face of the woman dressed in Southern Swallow's clothing was wrapped in layers of cloth, with specks of blood on it, making it impossible to see her face clearly. He could only feel that she was pitifully injured, which made Xiao Yini feel a sharp pain in his heart. He thought of how painful it must have been when Ning Shu was hit by the explosion. The pain in that moment made him not want to investigate the identity of this woman. He put down the curtain and waved his hand. Sorry to disturb you. Take care, Vice Envoy. Tuoba Han cupped his fists and said goodbye to him again. The mute girl and Pangue exhaled at the same time. They quickly lowered their heads and continued to follow the carriage in the direction away from the capital, moving further and further away from the flashy imperial city. In the other direction, in the western suburbs, among the crying crowd that was preparing to return home with the coffin, under the tall camphor tree, Xiahou Qing's heart suddenly jumped. He clenched his hands into fists and coughed violently. Young master. Hui Mo immediately took out a porcelain bottle from his pocket, took out a pill and handed it to him, but he refused to take it. Hui Mo was so anxious that he stamped his feet. Your Highness, you've spat out blood twice in a short time. If you don't take the medicine, your body won't be able to stand it. Jussi couldn't help but persuade from the side, now that things have come to this, no one can save the Milky Way. I know your heart is like a knife, but if you can't take care of yourself, how can you find the murderer who murdered Miss Ning? Xiahou Qing stubbornly pushed the medicine away. He smiled bleakly. Do you know? Just now, I seem to have heard her calling me by my ear, urging me to go and save her. She was going to be taken away and never come back. Hui Mo and the others looked at each other and sobbed. Master said that if you regret or miss someone too much, you will have auditory hallucinations. Are you blaming yourself? But this was an accident. Who knew that she would pass by the firecracker workshop and the workshop would coincidentally explode? Your Highness, you've already used all your strength. Beside him, Tianwen, who had been chewing his nails, suddenly said, Accident? I don't think so. Hui Mo frowned. You mean it has something to do with Princess Chongping? But we've searched all over her palace. The palace guards also saw eldest Miss Ning leave the palace with their own eyes. Then, she headed west. If Princess Chongping had the ability to do something, she wouldn't have to sadly accept the fate of the marriage. What's more, what good would it do her to murder Lady Ning? We've been trying to find ways to help her. Tianwen laughed and said, I'm afraid you don't know. In the end, it wasn't the 13th princess who got married, but the 5th princess, Xiao Changyue. Hui Mo was stunned. What? Chapter 456. Tianwen said, this happened just before the procession set off. At that time, Shi Ziyi was in a hurry to find Lady Ning, so I didn't have time to report this matter. Just as the 13th princess was about to get on the carriage, the 5th princess, Xiao Changyue, suddenly appeared and took the initiative to ask His Majesty to marry in place of Princess Chongping. His Majesty was very surprised, but the 5th princess was sincere and kowtowed. If His Majesty didn't agree, she wouldn't get up. His Majesty was moved by her sincerity, so he agreed to her request. Now, calculating the time, the procession should have left the capital from another direction. Shi Yan had always said what he wanted to say and wasn't the least bit courteous. So, could it be that after Princess Chongping asked us for help, she was suddenly bewitched by another power and used it to help her escape the marriage without being punished as a bargaining chip to turn her head and deal with us? If that's the case, Princess Chongping is too vicious. Shi Ziyi, let's go to the palace and ask her clearly. Hui Mo was confused and hesitated. Could there be some hidden story? I don't think she's like. Shi Yan's eyes widened. You don't think she's like that? But there's an old saying, you can know a person's face but not his heart. There's another saying, a woman's heart is the most poisonous. In Journey to the West, the white-boned spirit could deceive Tang Sanzang 3 times in a row. How can you be sure that she's not the white-boned spirit? I've said before that beautiful women are the best at lying. Their tears are the most powerful weapons. Hey, you can't have been bewitched by her, right? Shi Yan jumped away in horror. Hui Mo was surrounded by several pairs of eyes. He looked at his Shitzi Ye's pale face and felt very guilty. He weakly retorted and hid in the corner, "No, I didn't, I just..." I won't say any more." When they were besieging Huema, Xiahou Qing, who had been silent all this time, suddenly moved his eyebrows and opened his mouth to interrupt them. Ahem. Tianwen, tell me the whole story again, including when Ning Shu's carriage left the palace, which route it took, how many times it stopped, who it talked to, etc. Tell me everything. Don't leave out any details. With the heir's orders, Tianwen didn't dare to delay. He hurriedly abandoned Hui Mo and reported all the information he'd found in order from beginning to end. According to the palace's records, this morning, Lady Ning entered the palace at 5:15 in the morning. After that, she stayed in Princess Changping's palace for more than 2 hours before leaving the palace in a carriage at 7:15 in the morning. After that, she went west along Xuanwu Street and passed by Xinfang Terrace, Purple Bamboo Garden, and Qintai Road. At noon, she went out of the city gate and continued west. After that, she went to the tea house we've been to before. There, she rested for a while, said a few words to the owner of the tea house, gave him a tip, and continued on her way. Xiahou Qing listened to every word that Tianwen said and pondered it over in his heart. Immediately, a map of the entire capital appeared in his mind, marking the places that the carriages passed by. Then, his heart trembled, and he suddenly raised his head. Immediately follow me to chase after the entourage of the imperial bride. Shi Yan was shocked. Shiziyi, what's wrong? Why do you want to chase after Hechin's carriage? He quickly winked at Jiu Si and the others. Oh my god, did Shiziyi become too sad and his mind became chaotic? Xiahou Qing spoke very quickly, I don't have time to explain now. You only need to know that if I don't chase after them now, I will regret it for the rest of my life. His face was so serious that Jiu Si had only seen it 3 times in more than 10 years. The first time was when he lost his sense of smell and the first blood-red plum blossom grew on the side of his neck. The second time was when he completely lost his sight and handed over all his skills to them and ordered them to continue after his death to find the evil mastermind behind the scenes to comfort his soul in heaven. The third time was now. Therefore, Jiu Si didn't think and immediately sealed Shi Yan's mute acupoint. He brought the horse over to Xiahou Qing and helped him onto the horse. They mounted the horse again and rushed in the direction of another city gate as fast as lightning. Xiahou Qing bent over, causing the originally calm air around him to become a rapid gust of wind. Due to his extreme speed, the black satin in front of him slipped off carelessly. It was stolen by the wind before he grasped it again. Chapter 457. Prince Nanping's mansion has something important to do. Please make way. Hui Mo cracked the whip in the wind and led the way. Hearing the name of the Nanping mansion, the curious passers-by all moved out of the way. They stood on the side of the road and looked up, wanting to see what the legendary Nanping mansion's crown prince looked like. However, before they could see clearly how many eyes and nose the person in the middle had, they felt a gust of wind pass by and the person was gone. Many flower girls felt that it was a pity. Hui Mo whipped the horse again and turned his head while rushing. Prince, do you think Miss Ning is not dead? Holding the brocade firmly in his hand, Xiahou Qing's face was immersed in the flashing lights and passing shadows, which was very clear. The carriage went out of the palace gate and passed by Xuanwu Street, Fangfang Terrace, Qintai Road, and other places. Generally, it was the only way to go west, except for Purple Bamboo Garden. What's wrong with Purple Bamboo Garden? Tianwen suddenly had a flash of inspiration. Oh. I remembered now. That Purple Bamboo Garden was the residence of a great calligrapher from the previous dynasty. Because that great calligrapher's entire residence was exterminated by thieves, there were rumors that the area around the residence was haunted by ghosts. Therefore, the common people would rather take a detour than pass through the entrance. Over time, the garden became deserted and gloomy. Not many people could be seen during the day. Why did Lady Ning go there? Hui Mo said, maybe she had something important to do and didn't have time to think about anything taboo, so she ordered the coachman to take a shortcut. Jiu Sik pondered for a moment and said, there is a contradiction. The carriage went from the palace gate to the city gate. If it was hurried, it would have finished in 2 hours. But according to the record, Lady Ning's carriage left the palace at 6:45 in the morning, but it left the city at noon. If it was really hurried, it wouldn't be so leisurely. Huema suddenly understood. You mean, the extra moment was delayed in the Purple Bamboo Garden? Could it be that she had been replaced by someone else? Then who was the person who was killed in the firecracker workshop? Hui Mo's brain was buzzing and he felt that it was not enough. Xiahou Qing's thoughts became clearer and clearer as he sorted them out. It was as if he had smashed an ice mirror in front of him. The blurry leaf finally revealed its essence in front of his eyes, and the veins were clearly visible. This was a trap, a carefully planned trap, all for the sake of stealing her away from him. As the saying goes, concern leads to confusion. The other party had been playing a psychological war from the beginning to the end. From the moment he noticed Ning Shu's disappearance, every step had been perfectly calculated. Chapter 458. Who is blocking the road ahead? When the group of carriages passed by the Shirley Pavilion, they were suddenly stopped by 2 maidservants. The leader of the first carriage immediately shouted at them. A slender, dark-colored palace dress came out from behind the 2 maidservants. The person's face was covered with a veil. I am Xiao Zhongping. I am here to send off my eldest sister. 13th Princess. The guards immediately stopped the carriage and reported a few words to the deputy envoy. Not long after, a dazzling red wedding dress slowly walked out of the carriage. She walked in front of Xiao Zhongping and lifted her veil. The 2 of them talked in private. When she saw Xiao Changyue, Xiao Zhongping's voice suddenly became unstable. 5th sister, why do you want to marry for me? Did that person come to find you? Xiao Zhongyue smiled faintly as she looked at this little sister of hers who had grown up together with her but couldn't be considered familiar with her. This proud princess who had once been deeply doted on by the emperor had become gentle and indifferent after experiencing so many things. Furthermore, the rare heroic spirit in her forehead seemed to have vanished with the death of a man named Yun Ruohue, leaving behind only a noble and gorgeous empty shell. She said, someone did come to find me, but I was willing. Xiao Zhongping opened her eyes wide in shock. You were willing. As she spoke, her eyes became red. 5th sister, how could you? You should know what this marriage represents. Aren't you afraid that you will regret it in the future? Xiao Changyue gently tidied up her scattered hair. When she smiled, the valiant and formidable 5th Princess Xiao Changyue seemed to come back. In the first 20 years of my life, I loved, hated, resented, and cried. She had given her heart to someone who didn't deserve it, and then dug it back out. Thinking about it, I have experienced half of this world, so I don't regret it. These years, I have made myself a joke. In the following years, I should fulfill some of the obligations of a royal daughter. Little 13th Prince, since you were born into the palace, I know that you have not lived well, but as your eldest sister, I have never reached out to help you. I have been too negligent. This time, I will consider it as an apology. Don't worry, your elder sister isn't dead yet. I'll hold them off for you for a few years. The tears in Xiao Zhangping's eyes rolled down. He was speechless. He could only hold her hand tightly and call out, "Sister, don't think that I'm only doing this for you. I'm also doing this for Imperial Father, for Imperial Mother who has always been implicated by me, for the people of Great Yu, and for the people of Xiao Changyue, who will be recorded in the history books 100 years later, not just as an idiot who only knows how to love." Xiao Changyue put the veil back on her head and waved at her. "Little 13, choose someone who also cares about you and love him. Don't follow my old path. Remember to turn back when you hit the southern wall." In Xiao Zhangping's eyes, the beautiful red wedding dress danced in the wind. She boarded the carriage again and was taken away by the rolling wheels, further and further away. She pressed down hard on her chest and sobbed, "Okay. I'll turn back. Elder sister, I'll definitely do as you say." She was dreaming again. It was that man who was covered in black brocade. He looked like a celestial being who was about to melt into snow. However, this time, he was not standing under the camphor tree. Instead, he was riding on a horse. He looked anxious and travel-worn. Fine beads of sweat rolled down from his forehead and condensed on his chin. They followed the curve of his chin and slowly slid down to his Adam's apple, leaving behind a wet trail. Finally, they disappeared into his collar. On the side of his neck that was covered by his collar, a blood-red color was faintly discernible. It seemed to be in the shape of a flower petal. Ning Shu looked back and forth beside him. She was very curious. Who was this person? Why did he always appear in her dreams? Could it be that it was a love debt she had previously incurred? That feeling was good. He was so handsome and did not seem to be lacking in money. This kind of love debt, the more the better. But why was it that every time she dreamed of him, her heart would feel both happy and sad, causing her soul to feel uneasy? She wished she could immediately turn into a gust of wind and float to his side like a butterfly. Of course, she did not have the ability to turn into a butterfly. As a result, she woke up again and saw the mute girl kneeling beside her, washing her body and wiping her face. Only the ancient zither still had 1 or 2 pieces of rusty melody left. It was difficult for it to enter the Hall of Elegance. It was even more wishful thinking to rely on it to make money. Things like memories could be lost, but physical skills should be engraved into the muscle memory. How could it be easily forgotten? Unless this so-called identity of the 4th young mistress was fake. But what was their object in making up this story to deceive her? On the way, she could see that no matter if it was Pan Gue or the mute girl, they didn't have any killing intent towards her. Especially the mute girl. Her eyes couldn't deceive people. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to steal the fire pellet so easily. Putting away the fire pellet, Ning Shu got up from the couch and walked to the dressing table. She slowly removed the white bandage on her face and then lowered her head. As expected, there wasn't a scar on her face. There was only a small bruise on her forehead. But it wasn't a big deal. Her eyes became cold and solemn. Southern Yan's diplomatic group, and her personal team. 2 strange maidservants who had martial arts and could even master illusions. For now, she had to figure it out as soon as possible. Who was she? Chapter 460. The relay station was completely surrounded by the Hechin caravan and there were soldiers guarding outside. Ning Shu looked around and confirmed that she could not find any chance to escape. The current situation was unclear and she was not even sure of her own identity. Even if she escaped, she did not know where to go. The best choice now was to bide her time and act according to the situation. She was thinking about where she could find some useful words or clues when the door opened with a creak. She immediately lay back on the bed and continued to pretend to sleep. It was not Pan Gue or the mute girl, but a middle-aged man with a strong and rough appearance and greedy eyes. It was the Southern Yen deputy envoy, Tuoba Han. He stood with his hands behind his back, protruding his stomach, squinting his snake-like eyes, taking leisurely steps towards Ning Shu. Looking at the soft young girl on the couch, the muscles on Tuoba Han's face twitched as he slowly smiled. "You're such a sharp-tongued little girl. You didn't expect that there would be a day when you would fall into my hands, right? That day, you refuted me in front of everyone in the Zichen Palace Hall, causing me to lose a lot of face. Now, you have to rely on me to escape. Let me see what you're going to spit out from that sharp little mouth of yours." On the bed, Ning Shu felt a strong sense of disgust rise in her heart. She calmly pinched the fireball in her sleeve, but her face was calm as if she had really fallen asleep. But this little trick was too ordinary in Tuoba Han's eyes. He approached the edge of the bed, bent down, and pinched her chin. Pretending to be asleep. Haha, tricks. Ning Shu woke up from her dream. Her face was pale as she screamed. Like a frightened rabbit, she hid in the innermost part of the bed and hugged herself in fear. She looked at the unfamiliar poisonous snake in front of her. "You, who are you? Why are you in my room? Ah, are you the procuress who came to take me back? Don't come over. Pan Gue. Mute girl. Come and save me. I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back." Looking at the pure white eyes of the young girl in front of him, Tuoba Han raised his eyebrows with interest. He suddenly laughed. "Oh, I almost forgot. You shouldn't remember anything. Ha ha ha, my good niece, let me tell you, I am your good uncle, your father's close friend for many years. Ever since I was your uncle, I have doted on you the most. Quickly get close to your uncle." In any case, she had worked in a brothel before. Who didn't she serve? Keep the goodies within the family. What are you doing? Let me go. Ning Shu didn't even bother to put on her shoes. She ran toward the door as if she was escaping, scattering a handful of things. Tuoba Han broke into a run and chased after her. Just as his iron palms were about to grab her, he stepped on a few pearls and almost fell down. He staggered for a moment, and his evil nature became even more aroused as he chased after Ning Shu. Ning Shu ran for her life in the corridor, screaming at the top of her lungs as she ran towards the place with the most guards. If she guessed correctly, this should be the residence of the princess. As expected, the door opened. A dignified and beautiful figure in a red palace dress walked out unhappily from inside. "Deputy, why are you making such a ruckus?" Ning Shu immediately cried and threw herself at the princess. She was stopped by the palace maid beside her. "Where did this girl come from? Don't you know the etiquette? Be careful not to startle the princess." Ning Shu raised her head in fear. The white cloth on her face had been loosened halfway when she ran, revealing half of her face. When Xiao Changyue saw that half of the face, his pupils shrank and he said in shock, "Why is it you?" Chapter 461. Ning Shu's heart tightened. Does Princess recognize me? She had just grasped Xiao Changyue's hand when Pan Gue suddenly appeared from behind and pulled her behind him, looking warily at Xiao Changyue. "Nubi is here, don't worry, miss." "Vice Envoy Tuoba, what do you intend to do?" The mute girl's sleeve slid and a soft whip came out. Seeing Pan Gue and the mute girl return to their positions at the same time, the flesh on Tuoba Han's face trembled. He took back his claws that were about to reach over and straightened his back. From a ferocious beast, he turned back into half a human. He said with a fake smile, "Haha, what can Ben envoys want? I just went to see how my good niece is recovering and did my duty as her uncle. Who knew that this child injured her head and forgot everything? Now, there was a big misunderstanding. Ha 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 ha, I've disturbed Princess. It's fine, everyone can leave. He gave a dignified excuse and everyone gradually left. Only Ning Shu looked anxiously at Xiao Changyue. But Pan Gue and the mute girl were at her side so she could only be escorted back to her room. Seeing the bandages on her face loosen, Pan Gue and the mute girl exchanged a look and knelt on the ground. Miss was frightened today. It's Nubi's fault, please punish us. Ning Shu held their hands tightly, her eyes filled with water. You can't leave me alone in the future. I don't know anyone here. I was really scared just now. The mute girl's eyes turned red, anger rising. She took the soft whip and was about to go out and argue with Tuoba Han when she was stopped by Pan Gue. Pan Gue shook his head at her and then comforted Ning Shu. Miss, your body is weak. Nubi will serve you some food first. Don't worry, even if Nubi dies in the future, we won't leave you alone. Alright, I'll remember. You can't go back on your words. Ning Shu nodded gratefully. She sat at the small table and ate some warm porridge and side dishes under the two's service. Pan Gue observed her expression as he served the dishes. Seeing that she was really hungry, she ate half a bowl in front of them without any ill feelings. She didn't seem to be on guard at all, so he probed. This servant heard the noise and rushed over just now. I just happened to see Miss saying something to Her Highness the Princess. What was it? Ning Shu didn't even think. Oh, that princess saw me and said in shock, why is it you? I was puzzled and asked her, do you know me? Before she could answer, you guys had already rushed over. Tell me, did she know me in the past? But I am a brothel girl, how did I interact with the princess? Don't you think this is strange? Just now, Pan Gue had been so close to her and interrupted her conversation with the princess. This meant that she had heard everything. If she hid it now, she would be deceiving herself. She might as well tell the whole story and fish in troubled waters. As expected, although Pan Gue's expression tightened, his brows loosened imperceptibly. She smiled slightly and said, Miss, how can you belittle yourself? Although you have unfortunately fallen into prostitution, you have always been a prostitute who only sells her art and not her body. Also, you have been outstanding since young and are well known in the capital. That princess must have been curious and went to see you in disguise. Nubi heard in the capital that this fifth princess doesn't care about trifles and the people have an unusual reputation. So it's like this. Ning Shu understood. No wonder. But it is good that the princess is here today. Otherwise, who knows what that vice envoy Tuoba would do. My father sees this kind of person as a close friend and entrusted me to him. He is really blinded by wolves. When I see my father, I will tell him about this. By the way, I should pay a visit to the fifth princess some other day. Pan Gue thought for a while and stood up. Miss, you don't need to come out. Nubi will thank her on your behalf. You just need to rest well. Leave everything to Nubi. Mute girl, serve forth Miss. I will be back soon. The mute girl nodded silently and took the silver chopsticks. Ning Shu smiled sweetly at her and continued to eat happily. Before Pan Gue left, she suddenly said, Oh right, Miss, the mute girl lost something very important. It is a black ball. That thing is very powerful. Did Miss pick it up? Ning Shu's wrist moved and she stared blankly. What black ball? I didn't see it. Pan Gue showed a distressed expression. The mute girl checked from the carriage and it was still there. After that, she only went to 2 places. The way to the kitchen was searched. You didn't see it, so where could she go? That is the amulet Madam gave us to protect Miss before we left. Ning Shu also became nervous. Ah, it's that important. I'll look for it with you. The 3 of them searched the room inch by inch but couldn't find it. Ning Shu bent down and saw a round little thing under the bed. She pointed and said, "Isn't that the black ball you were talking about?" "Yes, that's it. Mute girl, you have to keep it this time. You can't lose it again. Otherwise, Master and Madam will skin you when we go back." Pangue's eyes turned. "Miss, your clothes are dirty. Nubi will go to the carriage and get a set of clean clothes for you to change into." "Miss, please wait a moment." Ning Shu curved her eyes and said innocently, "Okay." Pangue was all smiles as he pushed open the door and walked out. The moment the door closed, Ning Shu, who was drinking porridge, and Pangue, who was outside the door, stopped smiling. Their eyes were deep and unfathomable. Chapter 462. There was a small river behind the relay station. The trees beside the river were lush, and there was no moon or stars. Under the shadow of the trees, Pangue lowered his voice and said, "Deputy Tuoba, don't forget the agreement you made with my madam. My lady has evidence of your affair with someone else. If it weren't for the deputy envoy adding fuel to the fire, how could the envoy have fallen in love with Xuanfang Station, which had a huge dispute with him, and lost his life at the last farewell banquet? In the future, Deputy will have lost one of your greatest rivals in the Southern Yen Imperial Court. You've worked so hard to achieve this, so don't ruin it all in one day." Tuoba Han was enraged. "How dare you? Are you threatening me? Don't forget, who are you relying on to leave the Great Yu's territory?" "Of course, we need to rely on Deputy." Pangue smiled and raised his head. Under the shadow of the lamp, his eyes shone with a layer of silver blue. He looked at Tuoba Han and said softly, "I'm just a little maid, how can I have the guts to threaten you? I'm just giving advice. After all, what is more important than your great future? Is it because of a moment of anger, 1,000 li dike can be destroyed by an ant hole? Or is it because of your future career, wealth and glory? Deputy, think carefully. You." Tuoba Han was about to explode in anger, but after falling into the abyss of those eyes, his emotions were unconsciously trapped, and he could not move his gaze away. His expression was absent-minded, and he said unconsciously, "It's good that you know yourself. As for other things, I don't need a lowly maid to remind me." "Humph, it's late, I should go rest." Pangue smiled and said, "Deputy Envoy must be tired from the journey, you should rest well. When you wake up, you will forget all the unpleasant things that happened today. Deputy Envoy, this way, let this servant send you off." Under Pangue's soft and ethereal voice, Tuoba Han yawned, slowly walking back to the relay station like a marionette, and went up the stairs. After sending away this plague, Pangue withdrew his smile and turned around, meeting the astonished eyes of 5th Princess Xiao Zhangyue, who was 100 feet away. "Who are you exactly? What kind of move did you just use?" Pangue said blankly, "What is your highness talking about? How come this servant doesn't understand at all? Don't come any closer." Xiao Changyue retreated a few steps, and the accompanying palace maids immediately stood in front of her to protect her. "I saw everything just now. The deputy envoy was originally very angry, but when she saw your eyes and heard your strange voice, she suddenly seemed to change into a different person and left like a puppet. If this wasn't sorcery, then what was it? Also, when I saw Ning Shu just now, her expression was blank, as if she didn't remember me at all. Her series of actions were completely unlike the meticulous Ning Shu. It was as if he had been forcefully transformed into another person. Speak. Who are you people? What do you want to do to her?" Xiao Changyue hurriedly got married and didn't know that Ning Shu had been blown to death. He only thought that she had been plotted against. She waved her hand and the guards who were escorting the marriage immediately surrounded them. Pangue was about to go forward when he found that he was surrounded. The mute girl was guarding Ning Shu at the edge of the couch. Just as she was taking a nap, she suddenly heard a commotion downstairs. Ning Shu woke her up and said worriedly, "Mute girl, something seems to have happened downstairs. Could it be that the deputy envoy is acting up again? He didn't catch me just now, so now he's going to harm Pangue. Let's go take a look." The mute girl immediately stood up. After thinking, she tidied her clothes and made sure that she wasn't messy at all. She turned to open the door, but she didn't expect to feel a gust of wind from the back of her neck. She instinctively lashed out with her whip, but she didn't expect to see Ning Shu's cold eyes. She withdrew her whip and fainted softly. Ning Shu withdrew her hand blade and supported the mute girl's falling body, dragging her onto the soft couch. Just an hour ago, before Tuoba Han broke in, she was standing in front of the mirror and planning her next response. She had an idea and tore a small piece of cloth from the white bandage. She bit her finger and wrote a red save character on it, just in case. Then she suddenly heard a series of unfamiliar footsteps outside the room. The footsteps were very heavy and the strides were very large. She could tell that it was a tall and sturdy man. Therefore, she had an idea and tore off a few hanging bead curtains on the bed curtain as a small hidden weapon to deal with the unexpected. When Tuoba Han had said those offensive words, she had indeed considered whether or not she should kill him directly. However, she did not know who this person was or what his intentions were. If she killed him directly, there would be no end to the disaster that would befall her. Secondly, if she used that fireball, Pangue and the deputy envoy would know what she was thinking and increase their vigilance. She would be in a passive position again. Thirdly, the current situation wasn't clear. If she took the chance to stir up the pond water and make a big fuss, there might be unexpected consequences. The result made her very happy. She didn't expect that the deputy envoy would recognize her identity. However, before she could ask the result, Pangue rushed back in time and interrupted their conversation. She had no other choice. She could only wave her sleeve when the two weren't paying attention and throw that small piece of cloth at the fifth princess' feet. And when the fifth princess saw the bloody words on that piece of cloth, she would definitely take action. As expected, she gambled correctly. Chapter 463. May Your Highness the Princess be well. Walking down the stairs to the princess, Ning Shu's orchid grass drooped slightly as she curtsied in greeting. Xiao Changwei was sitting in front of the stone table, resting her chin on her hand as she sipped tea. Seeing her, she half opened her eyes and said lazily, "It's you. Why have you come to see this princess?" Her jade finger pointed lightly, casually pointing at Pangue, who was gagged in the corner by the guards. "Is it for your servant girl? Or is it to kowtow to Ben Gong and ask for forgiveness?" Ning Shu looked at Pangue and said in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing, "Your Highness the Princess is talented and intelligent, and outsmarts Ban Shu Wenji. This girl will not beat around the bush with Princess. This girl has something to ask Princess. Does Your Highness know this girl?" Xiao Changyue seemed to have heard something funny and laughed coldly. "Are you showing off? Are you trying to show off how famous you are, and how famous you are? In our Jing city, there may be many people who have not seen Ben Gong, but there are only a few who have not heard of your great name. You are very daring. Don't think that Ben Gong will always tolerate you." Catching the deep hostility in the princess' tone, Ning Shu frowned and continued to ask for advice. "So, Princess really does know this girl?" "To tell you the truth, my daughter suffered some injuries earlier and has forgotten many things of the past. I can't even remember my own name. Princess, please don't be stingy and enlighten me. Who exactly is my daughter?" "Forgot." Xiao Changyue raised an eyebrow and raised her voice. "You really forgot?" When she saw the pure and sincere expression on Ning Shu's face, Xiao Zhangyue laughed heartily. She was both angry and happy. You caused this consort to be in such a miserable state, but I didn't think that you would actually forget all about it. Hua you are good, you are great. Ning Shu's brows furrowed even tighter as she listened to her continue. If it weren't for you, this consort would have already married her sweetheart and grown old together. However, just because he accidentally saw you perform at Admiring Moon Pavilion once, he threw all his heart on you as if he was possessed and completely abandoned this consort. I am a dignified princess, but I have been reduced to the laughingstock of the streets and alleys. I have no choice but to take the initiative to accept the fate of a political marriage. Do you think I should recognize you? But at least the heavens have eyes. They can't bear to see you continue to bring disaster to the world, so they ruthlessly punished you. How satisfying. Xiao Changyue got up and walked step by step towards Ning Shu. If Ben Gong had known in advance that the young daughter of an old friend that had been left behind by the deputy envoy was you, Ben Gong definitely wouldn't have allowed you to travel with the group. Now that we've already exposed each other, this consort can't allow you to wander around in front of my eyes. Giving face to the deputy envoy, come, give her a semi-cursive letter. You can leave on your own. If you dare to appear in front of this consort again, this consort will definitely take revenge for that day. A cold-faced guard threw the semi-cursive letter in front of Ning Shu and then threw Pan Gue at her feet. Pan Gui's face was covered in tears as he explained to Ning Shu, "Young miss, I followed your orders and specially went to get our Southern Yan's rare specialties to give to Her Highness the Princess. I didn't expect that when I opened the door, I would be caught by the princess's guards. Young miss, we should hurry and leave. Her Highness the Princess has a noble status. Even if she is vicious and merciless to kill us, we won't be able to resist." Several guards surrounded them and forcefully pushed them to the front of the carriage. Even the unconscious mute girl upstairs was pulled down and stuffed into the carriage. Ning Shu had nowhere to go. She could only leave with Pan Gue, the mute girl, and an old uncle who was in charge of driving the carriage under the princess's banishment. Pan Gue shed tears and blamed himself. "Young miss, there is something that Pan Gue wants to confess to you. Actually, your face doesn't have any injuries. I purposely wrapped those strips of cloth around you because I know the grudges between you and Her Highness the Princess. If she recognizes you, there will be no place for us. So I acted on my own and was afraid that you would be frightened after knowing the truth. So I lied to you. I thought she wouldn't be able to recognize you after wrapping your face with the strips of cloth. I didn't expect that she still recognized you. It's all Pan Gui's fault. Ning Shu helped her up. I was too suspicious and didn't trust you all. So I had many conjectures and blamed you all wrongly. I hope you all don't take it to heart. Protecting young miss is our responsibility. Don't worry, as long as we servants still have a breath, we will send you safely out of Great U." Looking at the mute girl who was still unconscious, Ning Shu couldn't help but feel guilty. But at the same time, an even bigger and more vague suspicion rose in her heart. It was as if she was wrapped in a ball of gray cotton. She clearly felt suspicions all around, but when she reached out to touch it, it was soft and she couldn't exert strength. This feeling of helplessness made her very tired. Maybe, the truth was as they said, she had been too suspicious. But how to explain the scenes in the dream? Who was the sure they kept calling out to? Who was it? When she closed her eyes in deep thought, she didn't notice that Pan Gue beside her silently lifted a corner of the carriage curtain. He looked towards Xiao Changyue, who was standing under the lights on the second floor of the relay station in the distance, and gave a solemn and grateful gaze. What she didn't know was that in the time it took for an incense stick to burn after she left the relay station in the carriage, Xiao Qing's horse danced with its 4 hooves, stepping on the axle prints left behind by the carriage and stopping in front of the relay station. Xiao Qing's black hair fluttered in the night wind. He didn't have time to stop for a breath and hurriedly walked into the relay station. When she closed her eyes in deep thought, she didn't notice that Pan Gue beside her silently lifted a corner of the carriage curtain and gave a solemn and grateful gaze toward Xiao Changyue, who was standing under the lights on the second floor of the relay station in the distance. Chapter 464. Xiao Changyue, who had been woken up by the guards, walked out of the room unhappily. Looking at Xiao Qing, who was dressed in black, he suppressed his annoyance. What brings Xiao Shitzi here so late at night? You shouldn't be here to see me off. I remember that this princess has no friendship with Xiao Shitzi. Xiao Qing opened his pale lips and bluntly said a name. Ning Shu. If you want to find her, go find her yourself. Why are you asking me? Could it be that you're saying that eldest Miss Ning is in my group? Xiao Changyue laughed involuntarily. Xiao Shitzi is really in a good mood. You came all the way from the capital and traveled dozens of miles just to tell me a joke that isn't funny. In this deep night, Xiao Qing's voice was hoarse from exhaustion, but his tone was tense and solemn. I didn't mean to joke with Princess. Ning Shu is missing. She was kidnapped by someone using the scheme of replacing a flower with a tree. Not long after she went missing, Princess Entourage left the capital. According to my guards, Princess Entourage and the Southern Yen diplomatic mission reported to the Ministry of Revenue that there should be 36 carriages, but in reality, 37 carriages left the capital. Princess, please tell me honestly where Ning Shu is. 37 carriages. Xiao Changyue frowned in confusion. He asked the people around him and soon received a response. A young girl dressed in foreign clothing and her 2 servant girls were brought forward. Are you talking about her? She is Baiyu Linlang, the youngest daughter of a silk merchant from the Southern Yen. The deputy envoy and her father are close friends, so he asked me to bring her back on the way. I found her yesterday, so I didn't have time to inform the Ministry of Revenue. This is pardonable. Xiao Shitzi, don't you think so? Xiao Zhangyue's attitude was magnanimous. Furthermore, I have no enmity with that Ning Shu. I really can't think of a reason to harm her, so why should I hide her? If the Crown Prince is still suspicious, you can search everywhere. Everyone in my entourage is in the relay station. If you can find them, I will let the Crown Prince bring them back. Your Highness, should we search? Hui Mo whispered. He was also having a headache about the current situation. The Southern Yen envoys were not to be trifled with. With the addition of the 5th princess, who was the favorite of the emperor, the effect of these 2 troubles was more than doubled. Therefore, regardless of whether they found it or not, there was only one word to describe the result: troublesome. However, he still hoped to find Lady Ning as soon as possible. Otherwise, he was worried that his master would not be able to hold on. He looked worriedly at Xiao Qing. Just when they were confronting each other, Jiu Si came in from outside and reported, Your Highness, there are 2 fresh ruts at the gate of the relay station. The traces are very intact. It seems that they just left not long before we arrived. Continue to the west. Xiao Changyue's eyes flickered. He frowned and said, Guards, did someone leave the relay station just now? Why didn't I know? A yeoman runner stepped forward and said, reporting to the princess, no one has left the relay station. It's just that an hour ago, an old man arrived at the relay station with his entire family. He said that his wife was not feeling well and had not found a place to rest along the way, so he wanted to rest at our relay station for the night. However, the relay station is an important place and has never taken in commoners. Moreover, Your Highness is here, so it is not safe for Your Highness to stay here. Therefore, I gave them some medicine and urged them to leave. Your Highness is resting, so I don't want to disturb Your Highness with such trivial matters. Xiao Changyue nodded in understanding. I see. Do you have any questions? I will answer them for you. Chapter 465. After a moment of silence, Xiaoqing frowned deeply. He raised his sleeves and bowed to the front, saying in a hoarse voice, "I'm sorry to intrude on the courier station late at night. Please forgive me, Your Highness. After leaving southern Yan, the mountains are high and the rivers are long. I deeply admire Your Highness' righteousness. I wish Your Highness a smooth journey." Xiaoqing will take his leave. "Wait," Xiao Changyue stopped him. She looked at Xiaoqing's handsome face that was as white as paper. She moved her lips and showed some sympathy in her eyes. "I heard that Xiao Shizi has been ill for many years. Your complexion doesn't look good now. It's better not to travel late at night." Over the years, the only thing he understood was that some things were destined by the heavens, and separation might be the best arrangement for everyone. 2 months ago, I stopped a car on the street. Ning Shu said to me 5 words, "Don't force anything." Xiaoqing's footsteps paused. He held the half-shattered jade pendant of the abyss swimming fish in his hand. A thin bloody mark had been cut out of his palm by the sharp edge. He opened his mouth and said, "How did Your Highness answer at that time?" Xiao Changyue's eyes shrank. In the end, she didn't say anything to stop his footsteps. Because she deeply remembered her answer at that time was, "But what if I insist on forcing it? Only absent-mindedness can be unrestrained. If you really care about someone, how can you really let go easily? Even if she were to go back to 2 months ago and stop her, would she really be able to stop her?" She knew the answer and so did he. Coming out of the courier station, Mo was burning with anxiety. "Shizi, are we just going to leave like this? Are we not going to search? What if this is an empty fort stratagem, and eldest Miss Ning is hiding in here?" Xiaoqing shook his head. His throat bulged and the coughing that he had been suppressing along the way rushed out violently. His footsteps were weak and he couldn't help but bend down. Huemajusi was extremely anxious and hurriedly patted his back. Just as he was thinking about how to persuade him to take the medicine, Xiaoqing took the initiative to stretch out his hand and said, "Give me the medicine and let me take it." Mo was stunned. He was so excited that he quickly took out the medicine bottle and water bag and helped him to drink it. Because of the violent coughing, his face was abnormally red, but his lips were even paler. After taking the medicine, he casually waved his hand to indicate that he was fine and answered Mo's question, "There is no need to search. She is not in the station." The 5th princess obviously came prepared. "She will never let us find anything." "What do you mean?" When a person wakes up from a dream, especially when they are woken up by someone, their thoughts will be much more chaotic than when they are awake. Chapter 466. He didn't understand why it seemed like everyone was an accomplice, conspiring to steal her away from him. However, he would definitely find her with his own hands and pull her back into his arms again. Even if he had to be the enemy of the whole world, so what? On a moonless night, the river of stars also disappeared. A few muffled sounds came from the horizon. Jiu Si looked up at the sky and frowned. "Heir apparent, it's going to rain soon. Let's find a place to hide from the rain." However, he heard Xiaoqing shake his head resolutely and step onto the back of the horse again. The hazy light outlined the curve of his face. With one stroke, he said resolutely, "The rain will wash away the tracks left by the carriage. Therefore, not only can we not stop, we have to go faster, faster." In the pitch-black night, the road ahead seemed to be shrouded in black fog. Only the glass lamp hanging by the saddle gave off a faint glow, illuminating a small part of the unknown road ahead. The immortal looked down from the 9th heaven. Those faint lights were like persistent moths, stubbornly rushing toward their fate. Even if the road ahead was unknown, even if they had to go through water and tread on fire. The immortal laughed mockingly and waved his sleeves. Soon, a torrential downpour fell mercilessly, extinguishing the last flickering flame. In the heavy rain, the old man driving the carriage wiped the rainwater off his face and shouted into the carriage, "Miss, the rain is too heavy. All the lights have been extinguished. We can't see the road ahead. Let's find a place to rest." Ning Shu, who had just taken a nap, was woken up by the pitter-patter of the rain. She looked at the pouring rain outside and said, "The rain is so heavy and the road is slippery in the dark. It's really not safe. Uncle, please find a place nearby where we can rest and take shelter from the rain." "Okay. Good horse, giddy up." The old man hurried for a while in the heavy rain and saw a ruined temple with flickering candlelight inside. He coaxed the horse to change its path and stopped under a big tree beside the ruined temple. The mute girl took off her clothes and covered Ning Shu's head. The few of them trotted into the bustling ruined temple. There were already many people inside. Most of them were traveling merchants who were used to living in the open. They could find shelter in a ruined temple. There were also a few who hurried in after the rain. Several groups of people gathered together and smiled at each other. Soon, they each found a place to tidy up. Ning Shu, an old man, and 3 young girls, attracted some attention at first, especially the thick bandage on her face. However, the crowd lost interest after looking at her, so they retracted their gazes. The mute Pangue girl secretly observed the surroundings and found a corner where they sat down. She helped Ning Shu wipe her body. The traveling merchants had traveled far and wide, so they were the most familiar with each other. With so many people crammed into a small, dilapidated temple, it was fortunate that they didn't sleep. They got up and chatted with each other to relieve their boredom. The topics they talked about were the most popular topics of the past 2 days. Hey, have you heard? Have you heard? That Prince Kushao Minglan is truly a rare talent that is hard to come by in 1,000 years. Hearing this name, Ning Shu's eyebrows twitched. She vaguely felt that it was somewhat familiar, but she couldn't remember exactly how or why it was so familiar. Another person quickly said, "Quickly tell us, what did that old man do this time? Could it be that there's something more absurd than the time when he stood under the flower pavilion and played music for 3 days and forced the red door to open? Is there anything that old man can't do in this world?" Just this afternoon, he slipped out of His Majesty's state banquet and ran to Xiangtaku Mountain, saying that he had seen through the mortal world and wanted to become a monk. The old bald donkey was so scared that he almost met Buddha on the spot. It wasn't easy for him to beg his father and grandmother to persuade him to stop. He turned around and jumped into the Buddha bath pool, saying that he wanted to use the Buddha bath water to wash away the stink of money on his body. In order to save him, the entire Xiangtaku Mountain was turned upside down. After a lot of trouble, they finally sent him away. According to the people present, after sending him away, the bald donkey abbot went straight to Buddha and kowtowed 99 times, praying that Buddha would bless him and not let him come again. Ha ha ha. After that person finished laughing, his expression changed. He rolled his eyes and deliberately mystified, "Make a guess, what happened down there?" In the middle of the night, when one was sleepy, these interesting words could wake one up. What happened? Don't keep us in suspense, quickly tell us. That person lowered his voice and said, just after he left, a fish suddenly jumped out of the Buddha bath pool. It slapped its tail and died. Originally, monks were merciful and wouldn't harm a dead fish. Just when a young novice monk was about to bury the dead fish, he suddenly felt that the fish's stomach was bloated, as if there was something inside. The young novice monk was very curious and opened the fish's mouth to take a look. He saw that the fish's stomach was stuffed with a roll of paper. That paper was very strange, it didn't melt when it came into contact with water. On the front, there was a string of birth characters written in small words. On the back, there were 4 big words written in blood-red cinnabar, female lead Han Wang. Chapter 467. Gasps of shock immediately erupted from the crowd. Many people present might not have heard of the female lead King Han, but the legend of the female lead King Wu, when the Tang dynasty's Emperor Wu was young, was known to everyone as long as they were not ignorant children. Female Emperor Wu Zhao went against the heavens and usurped the Tang dynasty for the Zhou dynasty. She wantonly massacred the Tang dynasty's imperial family and almost overturned the Li family's dynasty. It became the most unbelievable and heavy stroke in the history books. As for the book in the belly of the fish, it was even more ominous and intended to cause chaos in the imperial court. Now, these two mythical stories had appeared in the current dynasty at the same time. What did this imply? It was very likely to cause great chaos. Appreciating the shocked expressions of the audience, the peddler leaned over and chuckled. The more interesting part is yet to come. Do you know who the woman with the surname Han is? She is Prince Ke's biological sister from the same mother, Princess Royal Xiao Mingshue's only legitimate daughter, Princess Heroe Han Sijia. It is said that when Princess Royal heard the news, she fainted on the spot. It is unknown if she has woken up yet. Everyone clicked their tongues in wonder and sighed. His Majesty just announced the marriage between Princess Heroe and the sixth prince, and then this happened. Now, it's all over. Ning Shu couldn't help but sigh when she heard this. This Prince Ke is really unlucky. If it was someone else who went to Xiangdi Mountain to cause trouble, it would be fine. But it was him who went. Even if that Princess Royal hated him, she couldn't complain to His Majesty that it was her biological brother who framed her daughter, his biological niece. If this isn't cheating his sister, then what is? Don't you all think so? The mute girl who was quietly observing the situation on the side nervously squeezed Pangue's hand. Pangue shook his head, indicating for her to calm down and not be impatient. He smiled and said, "Yes, that's why everyone says that this Prince Ke is really ridiculous." Ning Shu smiled and nodded, continuing to listen. Someone in the crowd asked suspiciously, "This just happened in the capital. How did you know?" The man's eyes were half closed and he said, "I won't hide it from old sir. I learned the art of divination from the Taoist priest of the White Crane Temple. I saw that the 5 elements of the city were in chaos recently and there was a murderous aura in the air. Therefore, I pinched my fingers and predicted that something big would happen in the next 3 months. In any case, I'm a merchant and I can do business anywhere. Therefore, I packed my bags and ran out." "You just came from the capital. Is there anything else new? Let's talk about it. We're all very tired." He slowly sipped his tea and put on airs before shaking his head and saying, "All right, all right, all right. Let's say one more. Then let's talk about this. What I just told you is the first big news. When I left the city at sunrise, I just heard the second big news. The demoness of Duke Ning's family, who could bring disaster to the country, finally met the king of hell." Some of the people from Lingnan who had just moved up north were curious, why do they call Miss Duke a demoness who brings disaster to the country? Could it be that she has done something outrageous? The mute girl's heart skipped a beat. She subconsciously looked nervously at Ning Shu, afraid that she would think of something when she heard this name. Her movements were so big that Pangue quickly grabbed her arm. The mute girl immediately came back to her senses and retracted her gaze. Fortunately, Ning Shu was listening with great interest and didn't notice her strange behavior. "You're not from the capital, right? No wonder. You haven't heard of the demoness of the Ning family. Let me tell you about it. This Ning family has a daughter. When she was 10, she was condemned to bring disaster to the 9 generations of her family. When she was 15, she married 3 husbands in succession. 2 died and 1 was injured. The Tan family, who had just been engaged, was ruined in just 2 days. The dignified Prime Minister Tan, who used to be second only to one and above everyone else, was forced to enter a temple to become a monk. TSK, TSK. Tell me how powerful this is. Right, right. The most outrageous thing is that she was clearly engaged to the young master of the Tan family, but she still went to provoke. Who did she provoke? The old man was filled with righteous indignation. The heir of Prince Nanping, Xiahou Qing. Chapter 468. The surrounding people widened their eyes. Wow! Is that true? The old man was so serious that he only lacked a piece of gavel in his hand. How can it be false? I saw it with my own eyes. Every day, she ran to the gate of Nanping Wangfu. Xiahou Shizhi ignored her at first, but she was shameless. Every day, she ran to the gate of the Wangfu to recite love poems and sing songs, forcing Xiahou Shizhi to open the gate. She threw herself at Xiahou Shizhi. She even forced a kiss on Xiahou Shizhi on the street. Xiahou Shizhi's heart was as pure as water, but he was poisoned by her. Tell me, this kind of behavior is simply outrageous. The worst is yet to come. After taking Xiahou Shizhi, she was still not satisfied. From Prince Ku to 6th Prince Xiao Yuni and 7th Prince Xiao Yunsen, they all had unspeakable relations with her. Even 8th Prince Xiao Yunjin, who just came of age, was tainted by that evil woman. I heard that if it wasn't for the Empress's slight punishment, even His Majesty was almost AI. If this isn't a demoness who brings disaster to the country, then what is she? An old man was filled with righteous indignation and immediately reached a consensus with his brother. There is actually such an unrestrained and unethical woman in this world. If we let her live a few more days in this world, our great you won't be far from being destroyed. That's right, that's why God couldn't stand it and took her away. It said that her death was extremely tragic. It's really satisfying. Ha 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 ha. Everyone scolded Ning Shu. Hearing this, the mute girl was scared witless. If it wasn't for the heavy rain outside, she would have immediately taken her people to the carriage and run away. Fortunately, Ning Shu was focused on eating the snacks that Pan Gue had just passed to her. She was like a little squirrel that was seriously storing food and didn't have time to think. The mute girl was relieved again. Someone raised a question. Why did I hear that although her private life is chaotic, she is a rare expert in solving cases? She contributed to several earth-shaking cases before, especially the case of the envoy's sudden death. If she didn't turn the tide, we wouldn't have been able to avoid a dispute with Southern Yen. So, she actually has some redeeming qualities. Tisk. You're too naive. All the women in the world relied on men to survive. For a woman, especially a beautiful woman, selling her looks was her greatest ability. Do you really believe that the honor she received was based on her own knowledge? Idiot. Ha ha ha. A long burst of laughter quickly erupted from the crowd. Ning Shu, who was peeling pine nuts, frowned. She suddenly felt that the delicacies in her hands were no longer fragrant. All the women in the world depend on men to survive. This kind of thinking is too narrow-minded and laughable. I thought that only those old fogies who thought highly of themselves and were stupid and ignorant would have such thoughts, but I did not expect that there would be so many people who would agree with them. It is truly laughable, lamentable, lamentable, and lamentable. I could not help but sigh, my great you is not far from decline. How distressing. The old man who had been leading the group to laugh immediately turned cold. He stood up and pointed at her. Which little girl is spouting nonsense? Come out if you have the guts. Ning Shu leisurely patted the pine nut shell off her hand and wiped her mouth with a handkerchief. She then slowly stood up and met his gaze. She chuckled and said, "It is this little girl. What advice does my dear friend have?" That person's triangular eyes scanned Ning Shu from head to toe, revealing a disdainful sneer. "So it's a girl who's so ugly that she can't even show her face. What, did I say something wrong? Why don't you tell me, all the women in the world are women, wives, and mothers. There is a saying, follow the father at home, follow the husband when married, and follow the son when the husband dies. If you don't have a man, do you think you can survive in this world? The clothes you're wearing, the maidservants by your side, and the carriage parked at the door, which one of them was not given to you by your father? Even if you die of old age in the future, your grave will be swept by your nephew. You actually have the guts to spout nonsense in front of me. Wait until you grow your manhood in your next life. Showing your face in public all day is a slut. You appear in the wilderness at such a young age, running into a group of men like us. You really are chaste and courteous." The men present could not help but burst into strange laughter. Ha 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 ha. The mute girl Pangue was so angry her face turned green. The mute girl could not help but put her hand on the soft whip at her waist. She wanted to go forward and whip these people's mouths. Ning Shu was not angry at all. She calmly patted the mute girl, indicating for her to calm down. Then, with her hands behind her back, she walked in front of that person, pacing back and forth. But after listening to Jun's words just now, I suddenly realized, why let His Majesty endure the pain of being separated from his flesh and blood, and send his beloved daughter to be loved? Why don't we just send you there directly? With your iron mouth, you can erase the thousands of years of hard work of all the women in the world. The Southern Yan army only has a few 100,000 soldiers. I'm sure it won't be a problem for you. Ning Shu's words quoted from the classics, spicy and humorous, amusing the audience until they were sprawled on all fours. The old man's face immediately darkened from top to bottom. He was so angry that he felt dizzy. He jumped up and angrily said, "You silly little girl, you must have eaten a bear's heart and a leopard's gall. You actually dare to slander me. Today, I'll teach you a good lesson on behalf of your father." He grabbed an iron rod from the side and swung it toward Ning Shu. The ruthlessness of his move was extraordinary. Ning Shu nimbly dodged. While dodging, she said, "You said just now that you're a traveling merchant who travels north and south. How come I don't think you're one? First, as a merchant, even if you leave the capital to avoid disaster, you'll instinctively prepare some local specialties and bring them to other places to sell. Every penny you earn is a penny. But I've been observing you for a long time. You don't have a single item on you. You're really the #1 merchant who treats money like dirt. Second, in order to do more business, most merchants are tactful and happy. Although they'll learn some martial arts for self-defense, most of them are reserved. But from your appearance, you don't look like a merchant at all. Instead, you're full of hostility and your eyes are filled with killing intent. It's really strange. I've also heard that there's a kind of bandits who don't openly hide in the deep mountains and old forests to rob people. Instead, they disguise themselves like cockroaches and rats and sneak into places where passers-by gather, such as broken-down temples and inns, to inquire about inside information. Once they've obtained the trust of the passers-by, they work together from the inside and the outside and kill all the passers-by in one fell swoop. Then, they take all the valuables for themselves. Most of these places are in the wilderness. Even if the passers-by are all killed, no one will know. Thus, there have been more than 10 such cases around the capital recently. I wonder if you're familiar with these people? Please say hello to them for me. Chapter 470. When Ning Shu mercilessly exposed his mask, the passers-by, who were originally happy and had nothing to do with them, suddenly changed their expressions. They all gasped and retreated in horror. Especially the old man who had just belittled women with the peddler. He was so scared that he almost fell over. He still looked down on women, but what if what this little girl said was true? His life was more important. The peddler quickly cleared a large area around him. His eyelids trembled and he immediately showed a fierce look. How did you see through my identity? Ning Shu looked at the thick calluses between his thumb and forefinger, as well as his eyes that had inadvertently looked at the gold and silver jewelry when he was telling the story. She was not prepared to tell him the truth, but deliberately revealed a sinister smile. She raised her eyebrows and said, "Because I am the Ning Shu you mentioned just now, the one who died tragically. I heard you've missed me, so I climbed up from hell. Why, are you surprised?" Her lips were indeed smiling, but her eyes were as cold as ice. The peddler was shocked at first, but then he became more and more angry. "How dare you scare me? You want to die." He pressed the handle of the iron rod. With a clang, the iron rod split into two, revealing the sharp iron awl that was 2 feet long. Once it pierced through, there was only one result: intestines would be pierced and belly would be smashed. He fiercely ground his molars and sneered, "Even if you know my identity, so what? My gang is hiding around this broken temple, waiting for my order to rush in and kill all of you. If you know what's good for you, hand over all your belongings immediately, and I will leave you a whole corpse, ha 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 ha." Along with his unbridled and wild laughter, black shadows that looked like evil spirits suddenly scuttled out from the curtain of rain outside and surrounded the small ruined temple. They were like greedy and bloodthirsty hyenas that bared their fangs and flashed their bayonets, waiting to kill and eat meat. Suddenly, desperate cries broke out in the broken temple. The old coachman used to be a soldier. When he saw the situation, he immediately raised his arms and shouted, "Don't cry. We have 30 to 40 people here, and there are at most 20 shadows outside. We have twice as many people. As long as we resist stubbornly, we may not lose. All of you, stand up. Take out all the wooden sticks and heavy objects and fight with me." But after waiting for a long time, no one stood out. The crowd looked at each other. Someone said dejectedly, "So what if we have more people? They're bandits who kill without batting an eye. My hands haven't even been stained with chicken blood. If you resist, you might die even more miserably." A cowardly man immediately came forward from the back and knelt on the ground, kowtowing and begging for mercy. "All my belongings are here. I'll give them all to you. Please spare my life. I promise I won't tell anyone else what happened. Heroes, please let me go. Let me go." With the first betrayer, there was a second, a fifth, and a 10th. Very soon, the dilapidated temple was filled with people kneeling on the ground. The old man looked at them with a pained expression. "Get up. You haven't even tried, but you've already broken your own spines. Where's your dignity? Where's your backbone? Get up." But still, no one stood up. The temple was filled with the sound of weeping. Ning Shu stopped the old man and shook her head. "Don't try to persuade him. It's useless." Although cowardice and avoidance were shameful, these were the bad habits of human beings. Once the knees were bent, it was too difficult to stand up again. "Look, look, look, you're all kneeling in front of me like dogs." Enjoying the people's desperate cries, the peddler raised his head and laughed sinisterly. He glared and pointed his iron awl at Ning Shu. "How about this? I'll give you a chance. Tie this girl up and kill her. Place her head in front of me and I'll spare your lives today. Go. Ha 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 ha." Chapter 471. Immediately, Dozens of pairs of eyes flashed with cold light like the tip of a knife, hesitantly surrounding Ningxu, causing her heart to turn cold. She silently looked at those strange, pitiful, selfish and ruthless faces and clenched her fists little by little. She looked at the peddler with disgust and gritted her teeth. "You are an evil spirit." He sneered twice. "So what if I am an evil spirit? Playing with people's hearts is the most interesting. Don't you want to be a heroine? Let's play a game and see if these people will choose your life or their own. If you win, I will let you go. In these years, I have played this game no less than 10 times and I have won every time. I have lost interest in playing. How about this? Let's end this quickly. I will count to 50, if you still can't cut off her head, I will send you to heaven. 1, 2, 3. A copper coin that fell on the ground could cause the beggars to fight and bleed, let alone life and death. In the silent temple, a 7 feet tall man kneeling in the corner wiped his tears and said, "My wife just gave birth to a child and is waiting for me at home. I haven't seen the mother and son yet." Me too, me too. I received a message that my mother was seriously ill, so I rushed through the night and passed by here. I don't deserve to die. We have suffered for most of our lives and haven't enjoyed 2 days of happiness. To die here like this, we are wronged. Facing the surrounding snake-like eyes, the old coachman felt a chill from the back of his head all the way to his spine. No one wanted to die, they wanted to struggle at death's door to live, but could it be that their lives were built on the death of his young miss? With trembling hands, he angrily said, "My young miss saw through this person's identity. If she wanted to escape, she only needed to quietly take us away. What does your life or death have to do with us?" But she didn't. Instead she took the risk to expose it in front of everyone, just to remind everyone to be careful and to protect your safety. But you actually repay kindness with enmity. Where is your conscience? Was it eaten by a dog? The coachman's words temporarily calmed the crowd. Everyone looked at each other and lowered their heads in shame. However, the vendor was still counting. He sneered at the group of people and deliberately sped up. 22, 23, 24. One after another, it was the countdown to one's life, constantly challenging one's humanity. A man stood up from the crowd. It was a father with a child. He pressed the child's head down and kowtowed a few times to Ningxu. "Miss, I'm sorry. My child is only 7 years old. I don't mind dying, but he can't. Since you want to save our lives, why don't you save us all the way?" Back then, Buddha also sacrificed himself to feed the tiger to obtain the great fortune. All of us here will remember your kindness and burn incense and send you paper money every day in the future. A single stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. Soon, the temple was filled with all sorts of cries and howls. They all looked at Ningxu in unison, feeling guilty and greedy. "If you're willing to sacrifice yourself for so many of us, I'll definitely go to the temple and offer you an altar lamp. I'll beg the Buddha and the Jade Emperor to bless you so that you can ascend to immortality as soon as possible. Good people will be rewarded. You are alone, but there are dozens of us here. I beg you." Although they were kneeling on the ground and praying, their fists were clenched tightly. They couldn't help looking for sticks or ropes around them with the corners of their eyes. It seemed that if Ningxu said no, they would rush over at any time and splatter her blood on the spot. Chapter 472. After going through 7 lives, Ningxu thought that she had seen all kinds of people, but the scene in front of her made her feel as if she was in an ice cave, as if she had seen the most evil. The coachman's hands trembled. He wanted to take Ningxu and break out, but he was blocked by the invisible wall of people. She coldly met the peddler's evil eyes, as if it was the last tug of war where she was unwilling to admit defeat. "Do you regret it, stupid girl? For this group of people, you offended this old man. Your intestines must be green with regret, ha ha ha. That person grinned, showing his yellow teeth, and laughed loudly. Although you are so ugly that you can't see people, your body looks slender and tasty. How about this? As long as you take off your clothes in front of these people, take the initiative to serve this old man, and make this old man happy, maybe this old man will let you go out of kindness, ha 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 ha. The old man was so angry that his face turned green. He wanted to rush over and fight with his life. Ning Shu pulled him back. She was like a piece of jade that was at the end of her rope, but was as firm as ever. She would rather die than live in dishonor. In this life, as long as I make a decision, I will never regret it, and I will never admit defeat. Ha, stubborn. Then let's see how long you can hold on. 38, 39, 40, more and more people racked their brains to think of a way to persuade Ning Shu to take the initiative to die. Some people even began to touch the sticks beside them, waiting for the first person to stand out and swing the stick. But someone spat, "Pay. How can you people have the nerve to say such things? You really make people look down on you." Everyone looked towards the voice. Ning Shu also looked up with a pale face, and found that the person who spoke was the young man who to Ning Shu just now. He said, "Just now you all ganged up to look down on women, saying that they can't do great things, and that they all rely on men to live. Now you want to force people to sacrifice for us, are you still men? You want your son to live, but your son saw your despicable and evil deeds with his own eyes today. In the future, if he learns from you, he will most likely grow up to be a bad embryo. If you have the ability, then pick up the wooden stick beside you and resist. Only by killing these bandits can you show your ability." Someone immediately retorted, "What right do you have to say that about us? Don't you want to live? So pompous. Bah, I don't believe it." The young man said, "It's true that I want to live, but if I force others to die for me in order to live for myself, what's the difference between that and me murdering someone with my own hands? Even if such a murderer were to live, he would live like a beast for the rest of his life. A beast is a beast. It's better to be alive than dead." Another person said, "I also don't think I can do this." Chapter 473. More than half of the 20 brothers had died in an instant. The merchant was furious. "You bitch. I want your life." The mute girl turned and blocked in front of Ning Shu with her whip. Her gaze was like a blade as though she was saying, "You come. If you want to kill my young miss, you have to go through me first." The remaining few bandits who were still breathing immediately raised their swords and surrounded Ning Shu the moment they received the merchant's command. No one cared about the passers-by anymore. They only had one goal, to cut Ning Shu into 1,000 pieces to vent their anger. The passers-by had experienced the shocking scene and were all scared silly. When they woke up, their survival instincts made them swarm out of the temple. But they didn't expect that when they took a few steps out of the ruined temple, pairs of wolf-like eyes flashed from behind the pitch-black walls and surrounded them. Hearing the miserable howls and sky-shaking cries outside, mixed with the cries of children, the red blood was washed by the rain and quickly turned the ruined temple into a blood-red sea. The faint smile on Ning Shu's face instantly froze. Not good. She was one step behind. She hadn't thought that this group of bandits had another move. The merchant licked the hot blood on the iron awl and showed his fangs. He said with a sinister smile, "You think you are a mantis? No, I'm the Oriole. I want everyone here to die." With reinforcements, the killing power of the rampaging evil spirits multiplied. Each one was a bloodthirsty beast. Even though the mute girl was skilled, she was still at a disadvantage when fighting one against many. Ning Shu was protected in the middle by the old carriage driver and Pangui and gradually fell into a disadvantage. After the mute girl was cut once, there was a second cut, a third cut. Blood soaked the light purple cloth on the mute girl's body like the rain outside. Pangue and the old carriage driver were also slowly injured. Ning Shu kicked a bandit over and looked at the deep wounds on their bodies. Her heart felt like it was being stabbed. What to do? If this continued, they would all die here. Seeing that the mute girl's arm had been slashed again, the soft whip fell to the ground with a paw sound. A foot swept over and kicked her against the wall, causing her to spit out a mouthful of blood, and then stepped on her to the ground. When the dealer grinned hideously and raised the iron awl in his hand to pierce through the mute girl's spine, Ning Shu dropped the sword in her hand with a clang. She gritted her teeth and said, "Don't kill her. I'm the one who offended you. Let her go and I'll give you my life. Your life for me. All right. Cut yourself first to show me your sincerity before you speak. Otherwise, I'll immediately chop off her head and chop her flesh into pieces for you to see." There was blood at the corner of the mute girl's mouth. She turned her head with difficulty and looked at Ning Shu in shock. She shook her head desperately and said, "No, miss, you have to escape. There was still time. Don't worry about me. You mustn't hurt yourself." Pan Gui's face was ashen white. "Miss." Yet Ning Shu did not hesitate at all. She grabbed the knife that had just been thrown away, closing her eyes and hardening her heart. "All right, if you're a man, you'll keep your word." Her hand raised and the knife fell. A white knife light splashed with hot blood. Ning Shu covered her arm and knelt on one knee on the ground, her body convulsing in pain. Pain, 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 pain. It turned out that chopping oneself would cause such pain. Her vision blurred and she almost fainted. She bit the tip of her tongue and pulled back a thread of reason. Chapter 474. Large beads of cold sweat fell to the ground. She reached out her arm, exposing the wound that was half a chi long in front of them. Because she had used enough force, the flesh on both sides split open. Large amounts of blood flowed out and flowed to the ground. Whoa! The mute girl's eyes were about to tear. Pan Gui's tears flowed like a spring. Ning Shu smiled weakly at her and nodded comfortingly. Then she said, "This blade has already been cut, my sincerity should be enough, right? Let her go, my little life is up to you." Ha ha ha. Good, you really are honest. I see your sincerity, it's the first time I've seen such a smart and vicious woman like you. TSK, it would be a pity to kill you directly. How about this, I'll be kind and give you another chance. Didn't you want to be the savior and living bodhisattva? Look at those people in the yard, you wanted to save them and fall out with me, but what about them? For their own survival, they almost wanted to work together to kill you. You racked your brains and planned to kill so many of my brothers to pave a way for them to live. They didn't even care about you and ran away first. Just a group of ungrateful things, is it worth it for you to go through fire and water for them? I feel it's not worth it for you. He walked over with a sigh, his hands pressing down on Ning Shu's shoulders and forcing her face to look in the direction of the purgatory outside. In the purgatory, the piles of corpses were already dead. The remaining old and weak soldiers had their tendons broken and were pressed to the ground, kneeling in a row. They cried in the rain but didn't know who to cry for. He grinned and raised his 3 white eyes, saying softly, "Some people are worth living in the world, some people are wasting their lives. Go over and kill them, as long as you kill them for me today, I'll let you and your servant girls go. You are a smart girl, you should make the smartest choice, be good, go." What was the voice of an evil demon? Just like him. Ning Shu's every finger was trembling, unable to control it, every piece of her flesh seemed like it was going to split open. The last bit of blood left her face as she said with hatred and fear, "You want to destroy me." She suddenly realized that this might have been a trap from the beginning to the end. Again and again, he tested her, made a bet with her, made her fall into the abyss again after a short period of success, forced her to harm herself, and finally made her wield a knife to kill people. His purpose was not for money or to vent his anger, but to push her step by step into a desperate situation, shattering her self-confidence, crushing her morals, and trampling on her principles until she was completely destroyed from the inside out. When she listened to him and killed the first innocent passerby, she was no longer herself, but a walking corpse that had lost her soul. She couldn't even face herself. This was even more unbearable than directly killing her. But shouldn't he make a move? Mute Girl had done her best for her the entire journey. Even if she was plotted against, she still stood in front of her without hesitation, in order to prevent her from getting hurt again and again. It wasn't a problem to kill her, but how could she watch someone who cared about her lose her precious life because of her? What to do? What should she do? Because of the immense pain, she clenched her fists, and more blood gushed out from her wounds. Let me faint, or let me die right now. That way, I won't have to face this kind of dilemma. In a flash, a thought suddenly appeared in her mind. You guys aren't simple bandits, who are you guys? Chapter 475. Appreciating her painful expression, that person laughed strangely. Weren't you the one who said we were bandits? Why are you doubting us now? Ning Shu closed her eyes and told him the truth. I just spoke nonsense. I just roughly guessed that you weren't a good person and heard the footsteps outside the temple, so I had a vague guess. In order to make other people believe, I just made up a few words. Then why did you say you were Ning Shu? I also spoke nonsense. I lost my memory and don't remember who I am. I just heard you tell a story and casually borrowed a name to scare you guys. I'm not that Ning family's eldest miss, I'm just a merchant girl who fell into a brothel. Interesting, interesting. You actually don't remember who you are. If Master knew, he would go crazy with joy. Ha 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 ha. He laughed enough before stopping. He didn't plan on revealing his true identity. It's not important who we are. What's important is that your servant girl is about to die. Her life is in your hands. Hurry up and make a decision. My patience is running out. He raised his foot and stomped on the mute girl's back. He stomped on her neck until she spat out black and red blood. Her breathing became weaker and weaker. Ning Shu's eyes trembled violently. The crimson water in the corners of her eyes rippled. She forcefully closed her eyes and picked up the sword that was stained with her blood again, walking out of the temple step by step. It really was a heavy downpour. It was clearly close to Yin, but the sky didn't look like it was about to brighten. The sun was completely stuck in the jar as if it would never be bright again. Her entire body was soaked by the rain. The wounds on her arms were washed away by the water. Pata pata, the water spread and mixed with the red blood flowing out of the old uncle's corpse. The people kneeling in the blood shook their heads at her in fear. No, don't. We know we were wrong. We shouldn't have abandoned you. Please don't kill us. Please. Someone had personally witnessed the deaths of others and was already half crazy. His forehead hit the mud. Don't kill me, don't kill me. Ah, I don't want to die. There were two voices in her head fiercely tugging at each other. One was saying, don't you see? The mute girl is about to die. After her death, it would be Pan Gue and Uncle Zhang. Originally, they didn't have to die and could have escaped together. It was because of your arrogance and recklessness that you wanted to be the savior that they were dragged into this quagmire alive. Do you really want to kill them before you're willing? Quick, take action while there's still time. As long as you take action, the mute girl won't have to die. Save as many as you can. The other one was saying, what right do you have to decide for others whether they live or die? Everyone had the instinct to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. No one was a saint, so it was understandable that these people ran away. Moreover, they were ordinary civilians without the strength to truss a chicken. What was wrong with that? When your hands are stained with blood, how are you any different from these bandits? This one continued to argue, do you think that if you don't kill them, they will live? Don't be naive. Even if you don't make a move, those bandits won't let them leave alive. Since that's the case, why waste a chance of survival by doing something useless? Idiot. Indecisiveness will only lead to total destruction. That one cursed loudly, you clearly know that the other side deliberately designed this, yet you still jump into the trap. Aren't you falling into the other side's trap? Even if you save the mute girl and the others, you will live worse than pigs and dogs for the rest of your lives. Another one laughed sinisterly, only when people are alive can they achieve great things. If they die, then there's nothing left. In any case, they won't live. You kill them first and avenge them in the future. Isn't it the same? Maybe they will be grateful to you in the underworld. Tears unconsciously fell from her eyes. The hand holding the sword trembled incessantly. She looked at the same tearful pleading eyes in front of her. When the tip of the knife was slowly raised, she suddenly heard a child's cry. Jie, don't kill Chi. Chi is scared. Jie, I beg you, Chi, such a familiar name. It seemed that she once had a younger brother with a similar name. After making a mistake, he would softly lean into her arms like a kitten and act spoiled, pretending to beg for mercy. Jie, I know I was wrong. I beg you to forgive Ji this time. Don't be angry anymore. The pit of her stomach was severely torn. The tip of the knife that had just been raised fell to the ground. Ning Shu fiercely closed her eyes. More tears flowed down like ripples. Mute girl, Pangue, Uncle Zhang, I'm sorry. I can't do it. You hate me. On the road to the underworld, I'll be your cow and horse to apologize. Pangue and the others also shed tears and gave up. Miss, don't say that. We failed to live up to Madam's trust. We didn't take good care of you. Instead, we let you fall into this situation. We have sinned deeply. We deserve to die. Ning Shu looked back and shook her head with a smile. Both of them felt relieved. But she didn't expect that the moment she turned her head, the crying boy kneeling in front of her suddenly stood up, grabbed a dagger and stabbed her waist. Chapter 476. 10 miles away, Xiahou Qing felt a sharp pain in his chest. He fell down from the horse and fell into the rain pond. Young master. Hui Mo and others immediately jumped down from the horse and ran to help him up. His forehead was hot and his body was soaked by the rain. He was as cold as ice. The black satin in his hand had already floated into the rain. His eyelashes were full of water drops. He grabbed his heart and said, something happened to her. Help me get on the horse. After feeling his pulse, Hui Mo stared at his neck in shock. He turned his head and held back the sadness in his throat. He shook his head and said, no, you can't go on. If you go on like this, something will happen to you before we find Lady Ning. He felt like there were 10,000 needles wandering in his limbs and bones. As long as he took a breath, he would pass out. Xiahou Qing fiercely grabbed his chest. 5 bloody fingerprints came out from his robe and mixed with the pouring rain. He had a hunch that something happened to her. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in so much pain. Ning Shu. Ning Shu. He said in a hoarse voice, "Are you going to disobey my words? Juicy, help me, get up." Even Juicy, who was usually the most obedient, didn't move this time. Huimo finally couldn't hold back his cry, "Young master, I'll take whatever you want to punish me. But tonight, you really can't force yourself anymore. Do you know that you will really die?" Xiaoqing had a vague premonition. He calmed down and reached out to touch the side of his neck. Then he said softly, "It's here, isn't it?" Huimo's lips trembled violently. He couldn't help but cover his eyes. Under the dim glaze lamp, he could see that on the side of Xiaoqing's snow-white neck, beside the 3 blood-red plum blossoms that were silently blooming, a streak of blood was vaguely growing out. The veins that looked like petals were slowly extending in all directions, and the 4th petal was about to blossom in the near future. But it shouldn't be. There were 7 years between the first petal and the second. From the second petal to the third, there was a gap of 3 years. Even if it continued to grow at this speed, it would take at least a year for the next plum blossom to grow. It had only been a year. With the speed of development, not to mention 25 years old, it is very likely that next year. Why did the heavens have to torture such a good heir like him? The great grief made Huimo want to cry out loud, but he didn't dare to make a sound because Shitzi was present. He bit the back of his hand so hard that it bled, but he didn't let himself cry out loud. "Let it come. I've been waiting for it for a long time." Xiaoqing laughed lightly, as if he didn't put it in his eyes at all. "This kind of fate is within my expectations. It's just a matter of time. What's there to be surprised about? In the past 11 years, I've been haunted by it, tortured by it, and almost defeated by it time and time again. My life was once firmly bound by it. I fell into a state of paranoia and was unable to break free. It wasn't until I met her that I broke free from that dark rope little by little. For so many years, I fought with it and was not killed by it. It's just the beginning of the 4th petal. If you have the ability, take my life away. If you can't, as long as I'm still alive, I must find Ningxu." Huimo finally couldn't help crying out loud. He cried heartbreakingly like a child. Jiu Si, Shi Yan and others also had red eyes. They clenched their fists and cried silently. After crying in a hurry, Huimo raised his sleeve to wipe his tears. He bent down and carried Xiaoqing on his back. "Okay. Shitzi, as long as I'm still alive, even if I have to carry you, I will definitely help you find Lady Ning." Chapter 477. Huimo took off the raincoat on his body and covered his master tightly. Then he helped him to get on the horse. Behind them, a light carriage came in the wind and rain and stopped behind them. A person in a snow-white palace dress came down from the carriage. Huimo looked back and saw who the person in the snow-white palace dress was. He was surprised and said, "13th princess. Why are you here?" Xiao Zhangping's snow-white palace dress fluttered in the heavy rain. Soon, it was soaked and stuck to her body. The palace maid held an umbrella for her, but she pushed it away. She looked at them with tears in the corner of her eyes and said, "I chased you all the way. Xiao Shitzi, give up, don't chase anymore." Hearing her voice, Xiaoqing suppressed his cough and said distantly, "What's the reason? How can you chase after her like this?" Xiao Zhangping looked at his pale face and cried, "Anne. It's useless. Even if you catch up with her, it's useless. Instead, it will hurt her." Xiaoqing's tone was full of distance. He was no longer as tolerant as before. It was as if he was talking to a stranger. "If it weren't for you, she wouldn't be in danger. Why should I believe you?" In the face of such an indifferent face, Xiao Zhangping subconsciously dodged. But Jiu Si and the others had the same look. Even Hui Mo, who handed her a handkerchief in the moonlight night and asked her not to cry, looked at her with full of vigilance. This feeling of being isolated and hostile by everyone made Xiao Zhangping's heart very uncomfortable. She opened her mouth and wanted to defend herself. But after she opened her mouth, she couldn't say anything. Xiao Qing no longer cared about her and said in a hoarse voice, "Let's go." Looking at their backs, Xiao Zhangping clenched her fists and finally couldn't help but say the truth loudly, "I'm telling the truth. It's not someone else who stole her, it's her mother and Princess Axayan." Hui Mo immediately reined his horse, turned back and said, "What? Is it true?" This was too inconceivable. They have been investigating the murderer of Lady Ning, but it turned out to be her mother. Is the rain too heavy or the night too late that he heard it wrong? He subconsciously said, "How is this possible? Are you talking nonsense? You're trying to lie to us again." Xiao Zhangping shook his head vigorously to prove himself. "I didn't. If what I said just now is a lie, then let me die alone and without love in this lifetime." Hui Mo's heart moved. He subconsciously took a step closer to her, but he pulled the reins back to his original position. He tried to maintain a cold face and said, "We trusted you before, but you still lied to us. How can I dare to believe you again?" Xiao Zhangping's face paled even more. The rain had already soaked her cloud-like hair, making her look bleak and pitiful. "I really didn't lie to you this time. Believe me this time. Everything I said is true. That night, after discussing with you how to escape the marriage, I hurried back to the palace. On the way back, I met Princess He Axayan, who was blocking my way. She proposed a deal to me, as long as I helped her complete this plan, creating the illusion that Ning Shu had suddenly died, and then quietly sending Ning Shu out of the capital, leaving Great Yu. She would help me solve the marriage dilemma. At first, I didn't want to agree because I really couldn't understand her purpose. But no matter how I asked, she refused to tell me the reason. Under my repeated questioning, she directly knelt in front of me and said that as long as Ning Shu stayed in the capital for a day, her life would be in danger at any time. Now the only person who could help her was me. Seeing her like that, I thought of my own mother. She looked at me with similar eyes before she died. "I'm sorry, Prince Xiahou. I know that as long as I agree, I will betray your trust and make you fall into pain. But I really can't refuse." And she bit her lips, unable to speak. She didn't dare to say the unbearable words. But at that time, she did have selfish motives. Seeing him snuggling with her, she felt like her heart was being cut by a knife. She really couldn't accept it. At that moment, the dark voice in her heart defeated all her hesitation. If Ning Shu disappeared, then would she and Prince Xiahou still have a chance? This was the person she had been thinking about for nearly 12 years. How could she be willing to let go? She generously wished him and another woman to be together forever. Chapter 478. Xiao Zhangping's expression was so sincere and urgent that it didn't seem like he was lying at all. Hui Mo looked at his young master hesitantly and saw that his young master wasn't surprised at all after hearing his words. Instead, he opened his mouth very calmly and said a few words. "I guessed it." "You already guessed it?" Xiao Zhangping murmured. The sound of the rain covered Xiahou Qing's suppressed coughs. Like a curtain of smoke, it made his face and voice appear hazy. However, the rain was also like a jade knife, sharpening the calmness and determination in his bones to the point that it could be seen clearly. Cough, cough. He started to analyze coldly. "When I heard the bad news yesterday, I was shocked and could not think. Until I rode the horse this way, I calmed down and thought carefully. The flaws in the plan appeared one by one. The first flaw was, a mother, when she learned that her most beloved daughter had suddenly died and the cause of death was suspicious, her first reaction, other than grief, should be anger. She should want to immediately catch the culprit and take revenge for her daughter. But at the time, other than crying in grief, she did not have any other reaction. Even Duke Ning was silent. No one asked for an investigation. It was as if they all silently accepted that it was an accident. The second flaw was Zigui. Zigui was the personal secret guard that Duke Ning had sent to her. He was also a death guard. Unless there were special arrangements, he would not be more than 10 feet away from her. And they had a close relationship. Zigui had risked his life for her more than once and almost died. Under this premise, after hearing the news of her death, Zigui would appear to grieve for her and do his best to find the cause. But she disappeared. From yesterday when Ning Shu entered the palace until now, she had not appeared once. This was not normal. It was thought-provoking. And the last flaw, Princess Wu. When I went to the courier station to ask but to no avail, she said something to me. She said, "These years are too long. The only thing I understand is, some things are predestined. Perhaps separation is the best arrangement for everyone." She also advised me not to force things. She had no enmity with us, so why did she help the other party hide Ning Shu's tracks? She also repeatedly advised me not to chase after her, as if she firmly believed that Ning Shu was not in danger. There was only one explanation. In her mind, the person who stole Ning Shu was someone who would never hurt her and had her best interests at heart. After combining the 3 flaws, the final answer isn't hard to guess. Other than Ning Shu's mother, I can't think of anyone else who is more suitable. His reasoning was so clear that he had almost described the outline of the matter clearly. Xiao Zhangping clenched his fist and asked, "Since you have guessed it, why do you still insist on chasing after him? Maybe letting her go is the best thing for her." "Impossible." Xiahou Qing sneered, stubbornly refusing. If running away was useful, then the curse that had been binding her since she was 10 years old and the 4th plum petal that was about to grow on the side of her neck would be laughable. Princess He Xian had taken such a huge risk to send Ning Shu away. This proved that the person hiding in the dark was ready to make a move and was ready to strike. For so many years, that person had played them in the palm of his hand. How could he let Ning Shu leave Great Youth so easily? Princess Hixin wanted to play the game of a cicada escaping, but the mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Instead, she might fall into the other party's trap. When he thought that she might be in a place where he could not see, suffering terrible injuries and inhumane torture, his 5 viscera and 6 bowels were stirred up in pain. Death was near. She was the only light in his dark life. He would never allow this light to be taken away by others. In this world, only I can protect her. As long as I am alive, she can only stay by my side. She is not allowed to go anywhere. Huemo, continue on your way. Chapter 479. Xiao Zhangping was deeply shocked by his words. Large teardrops rolled out of her eyes. She didn't know if she was moved or if she finally accepted it. It was impossible. Even until death, it was impossible between her and Xiahou Qing. Her emotions made her close her eyes and say loudly, "You said you could protect her, but now you can't even protect yourself. If you continue like this, you might fall first." On the horse, Xiahou Qing's lips curved slightly, as if he didn't care about his own life and death. "Then I will die before her and pave the way for her to go to the underworld." In the ruined temple, Ning Shu's waist was pierced by a knife. She spat out a mouthful of blood. In an instant, the sky darkened and she seemed to see the familiar road to the underworld waving at her again. "Miss!" Pan Gue wanted to rush over, but was hit by a bandit on the back and tied to kneel on the ground. The corners of Ning Shu's mouth twitched as she looked back in disbelief. The child let go of his hand, trembling in fear. He pointed behind him and cried as he retreated, "Sorry, sorry." She said, "As long as I kill you, she will let my father go. She can't live without a father." "Sister, sorry." Behind him, a person walked out from the darkness and pressed on his small shoulder, laughing softly. Her voice was hoarse. It was the sheet that the child spoke of. The peddler and the others immediately bowed, "Master." She waved her hand casually and raised her head, revealing a masked face under the cloak. She bent down and praised the crying boy, "Child, you did well. Your father's life was saved because of you. You are a good child. Now, stab her again and I will let you go. This way, you and your father can go home alive." The voice was very ghostly, like a demon bewitching people. The child cried in fear, but in the blink of an eye, another knife stabbed her. But because the knife was trembling so much, it went crooked and left a slanted wound. Ning Shu slapped it away. The child stumbled to his father and cried. Hearing the satisfied laughter of its master, "Ha ha ha ha." She waved her sleeves and the bandits kindly let the father and son leave the ruined temple. Half of Ning Shu's body was numb, the intense pain was like needles, densely pricking her nerves, making her want to cry out in pain. But what was more painful was the beating heart in her chest. She covered the wound and coughed out blood, but she clenched her teeth and swallowed it. She raised her head, her eyes burning. Who are you? Who are you? How did I offend you? Who am I?" Good question. Under the mask, the woman's voice was low and muffled. She paced slowly in front of Ning Shu. "I'm a person who watched you grow up. Perhaps you have never known of my existence, but I have witnessed every stage of your growth with my own eyes. I have watched you grow from a fair and soft baby who could smile as soon as you were born into an intelligent and adorable little girl who would fight for justice. I have watched you grow from a 3 feet tall little girl into a slender, elegant, determined, and resolute young lady. I have watched you grow from being cursed and ostracized by all the people in the city. You hid in a corner and cried quietly. Later on, you calmed down and quietly grew. You took charge of solving big cases one after another and stole the limelight. For these 16 years and 9 months, I have been quietly accompanying you in the dark, my good child." In the heavy rain, she stood behind her and gently stroked her soft hair, whispering and chuckling, like a kind elder, but also like a breathing ghost who stepped on bloody footprints and crawled out of the abyss of fire step by step. Chapter 480. Facing such a person, Ning Shu felt a sense of fear for the first time in her life. She was like a bird flapping its wings. She thought that the sky was high and she could do whatever she wanted. She even wanted to fight against fate, but she didn't expect that she was actually locked in a huge birdcage. The owner of the birdcage had been standing outside the cage quietly watching her. He watched her toss and turn, watching her jump around as if he was looking at a toy to relieve boredom. When he was tired of watching, he reached out and opened the door of the birdcage. He grabbed the bird that didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth and strangled it to death. Appreciating the shock and fear in her eyes that couldn't be hidden, she slowly smiled. The hand that stroked her hair was like a poisonous tongue, gently stroking her face as if admiring a very precious porcelain ornament. You are too similar to me when I was young. It's like God created another me. Sometimes looking at you, it's like watching my own journey of growth. I grew up willfully and freely, free and unrestrained, just like how I should have been. So on one hand, I wanted to destroy you, but on the other hand, I couldn't bear to do it. On the other hand, I couldn't bear to do it, but I had to destroy you. Originally, I was going to appear on your birthday to give you a surprise, but I didn't expect you to almost slip away from me. But God helped me and let me find you. It seems that you and I are destined to be entangled together. Wave after wave of coldness, like rain falling on her body, continuously took away her body's temperature from the wounds on her body, making her feel cold to the bone. She said, "Why? What kind of long-cherished wish do we have? Why won't you let me go? You're trying to get information out of me and find clues to my identity from my words, aren't you? Good child, don't worry. You will never know who I am, unless you die." After she said softly, she retracted her hand and retreated back into the dark rain. She raised her hand and said loudly, "For the sake of our past relationship, I gave you a few chances just now, but you didn't cherish them. Now, the choice is back to them. Come, those who want to live, pick up the saber, sword, or dagger beside you and stab her. As long as you stab her, you can leave safely like the father and son." The people who were kneeling on the ground and pacing back and forth on the edge of despair all felt as if they had been kicked back to the human world after hearing this sound. They were both shocked and full of anticipation. Really? In the crowd, the old man who was scared out of his wits shook his wet white beard and stammered. Sheets smiled, and the emotionless eyes behind the mask coldly glanced at him. "Why don't you try and find out? It's not like the knife is stabbing you anyway." The old man picked up a broken knife from the side and walked over to Ningshu. He looked at her guiltily and shyly before closing his eyes and stabbing her with the knife without saying anything. Ningshu dodged backwards, but dozens of hands lunged at her from all directions like bloodthirsty hyenas. Even the person who had stood up for her twice in a row now stood in front of her with red eyes and a knife in his hand. He shook his head and said, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm really scared out of my wits. Death is too scary. It's really too scary. Anyway, she said that as long as I stab you once, she would let us live. She didn't say if it would be deep or shallow. I'm sorry, I swear I'll just stab you gently, really gently. You won't feel the pain, okay?" Then, one stab after another, gently, heavily, crazily, sorrowfully. Dozens of broken knives, daggers, and even a sharp and slender stone were all stabbed at her. She wanted to escape, but her hands and feet were held down by the crowd and she couldn't escape. After one person finished stabbing and got her pardon, the others were like cockroaches that smelled blood and rushed at her even more crazily. She screamed in pain silently. Pain! It was 1,000 times more painful than being skinned alive. Who could save her, or just let her die? Chapter 481. Her entire body was like a broken sieve with countless holes. Air was leaking from every part of her body. Countless layers of pain stacked together. She couldn't even scream. But Sheet was still clinging to her like a demon, refusing to let go. Do you see? People in this world are all like this. One moment, they're righteous, playing the role of a loyal official. The next moment, for their own interests, what etiquette, honor, loyalty, these sanctimonious things can all be abandoned. Does it hurt? If it hurts, then cry. Cry for me to hear. Ning Shu's throat kept spitting out blood foam. It was as if her internal organs were crushed and were about to flow out of her mouth. She shouted with tears rolling down her face, "Get out! I won't cry. I won't cry for you even if I die. Miss." Pan Gui's ears were bleeding. He used all his strength to break free from the ropes and rushed to her. Seeing Pan Gui's whirlpool-like eyes, she paused for a moment. Then she sneered and waved her sleeve to slap her away. "You dare to embarrass yourself in front of me with such insignificant skills? You're asking for death. Pan Gue was heavily injured by the slap. He lay on the ground dying. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. What was the feeling of being powerless? In front of absolute power, they were like ants. No matter how they jumped, it was just a joke. Hot tears flowed out and mixed into the rain. Ning Shu shouted, "Kill me if you can." She shook her head sarcastically, "No, I won't do that. Death isn't a punishment to you, but a reward. My good child, how could I let you end all the pain that I've suffered for so many years so easily? Do you hate me? No, you should hate these people in front of you. Hate this world. You've been trying to figure out who you are all this time, right? Let me tell you, you're Ning Shu, Duke Ning's eldest daughter. The medicine you were drugged with, your memories were erased, including your identity being erased and thrown out of you. It's all thanks to your birth mother. Do you find it unbelievable? Let me tell you, it's true, it's the truth. The reason why you were so easily plotted against was actually because your mother personally poisoned your soup. You can ask your maidservant who pretends to be deaf and mute if this is the case. Ning Shu thought that she could no longer feel pain, but when she heard these words, she suddenly spat out a large mouthful of blood. She stared with bloodshot eyes and tried her best to deny, "No, impossible, I don't believe it." The mute girl's acupoints were unsealed. Facing her interrogation, she shook her head desperately with tears in her eyes. "No, no. The princess is doing all this for you, Mississippi. You must not believe her nonsense." But when she opened her mouth and said the first word, the light in Ning Shu's eyes dimmed. She was still trying to sow discord. "Listen, her identity as a mute girl is fake. Everyone is working together to play you in circles." The mute girl, also known as Zigue, cried bitterly and defended herself. "No, this subordinate did not lie to you on purpose. This subordinate was afraid that you would recognize my voice and awaken your memories. This subordinate had no choice. Miss, you must not listen to her. You must not." She casually raised her hand. "Then can you deny the fact that her mother personally put poison in her soup and coaxed her to drink it?" Zigue's lips trembled, unable to refute. In this short moment of hesitation, something in Ning Shu's heart turned to ash, no longer warm. She shook her head, looking down at Ning Shu who was in a pool of blood with pity. "So pitiful, your birth mother betrayed you. Perhaps you should call me mother and let me dote on you." "Yes. It's that hateful gaze. Hate, hate, hate. You wish you could drink human blood and eat human flesh, and kill all those who betrayed you. Hate, hate, quickly become the second me." After more and more people finished stabbing her, they hurriedly threw down their knives and ran away, leaving only 2 or 3 people. The people who held her hands and feet left one after another, but it was useless. The last time she felt pain and could even move her fingers was a long time ago. Now she could only close her eyes and silently hope. What is the taste of death? I beg you, quickly come and find me. Then, she was finally satisfied and lost consciousness. Miss! Zigue cried until the corners of his eyes were bleeding. He looked at her with the most hateful and most fearful gaze in the world. Demon. You beast. Demon. TSK, Duke Ning's hidden guards are a bit interesting. You're called Zigue, right? To prevent her from recognizing you, you purposely pretended to be a little mute. It's been hard on you. How about this, since you like to pretend to be a mute, this consort will fulfill your wish. From now on, you can be a real mute with peace of mind, ha ha ha. Zigue's chin was forcefully pried open. He felt a chill at the bottom of his tongue. Something in this life had completely left him. After doing all this, she threw away the pink piece of meat in her hand with waning interest. She turned to look at Ning Shu, who was lying in a pool of blood like a tattered doll, using a handkerchief to carefully wipe her blood-stained hands. This game should end. The last person stared with bloodshot eyes at Ning Shu's heart, which was the only intact part of her body, and raised the dagger high up. Chapter 482. A cloud-piercing arrow pierced through the thick curtain of rain and hit him between the eyebrows. He was killed and fell into the pool of water. She immediately retreated behind the human wall and turned back coldly. Who? Behind the curtain of rain, Shi Yan held a bow in one hand and an arrow in the other. He said loudly, "I am the first general under Xiahou Qin, the son of Prince Nanping. If you want to live, quickly kneel down and beg for mercy." She narrowed her eyes and looked at the horses coming out from behind the rain and fog. Unknowingly, they gradually surrounded them. Unknowingly, the rain gradually became lighter and the sky finally showed a little bit of light. Although it was weak, it was not far from dawn. She judged the strength of both sides and glanced at Xiahou Qin. "You can save her today. How can you save yourself in the future?" Xiahou Qin said hoarsely, "Don't worry. Even if I can't save myself, I will drag you to hell with me." She raised her head and laughed, "Ha ha ha ha. Good, good, good. You are indeed his son. Then I will wait for that day. I hope that before that day comes, you will not all die." She decisively hid in the middle of the crowd and said one word, "Kill." The group of people disguised as bandits finally bared their bloody fangs. Like men of sacrifice who knew no pain, they fought against the guards of Lord Nanping's mansion. They allowed the eyeless swords and sabers to stab their bodies. Their blood flowed all over the ground, but they remained indifferent until they died and fell to the ground. Even though the guards of Prince Nanping's mansion were well trained, they were a little restrained in the face of such a group of zombies. They could only watch Shi rush out of the encirclement surrounded by her confidants. Shi Yan was not convinced and chased with an arrow. He was stopped by Jusi. "Don't chase a desperate enemy. Be careful of traps. It is more important to save Lady Ning." Shi Yan turned back unwillingly and cleaned up the remaining people. With the help of Hui Mo, Xiahou Qin anxiously got off the horse and killed all the men of sacrifice who tried to stop him. He stepped on the road paved by the corpses and walked step by step to Ning Shu. When he saw the situation of Ning Shu's body, Hui Mo took a breath and subconsciously stopped his young master. He trembled. "No. Don't touch it." Xiahou Qin's hand trembled as he asked, "What's wrong?" Hui Mo didn't answer, or he didn't know how to answer. He immediately leaned over to feel her breath. There was only a wisp of breath left. He had examined so many corpses and treated countless injured people, but he had never seen someone like this. There was not a single piece of flesh on her body that was unharmed. There were more than 10 or even 20 wounds on her body, and every wound was so deep that the bones could be seen. Every wound was oozing blood, and her clothes had long been dyed red with blood. The parts that were most heavily injured had turned white after being soaked in the rain for a long time. They were rolled up to the sides, revealing the bright red flesh inside. Even if he wanted to reach out, he didn't know where to touch. He was afraid that the strained spider silk would break if someone touched it lightly. Hui Mo's eyes turned red in an instant. He turned his face away and didn't dare to look. What had Lady Ning suffered? How could he describe her current appearance to his Shitzi? He couldn't bear to say a single word. Xiahou Qin seemed to have a premonition. He stretched out his hands and gently touched her quiet and obedient body a few times. When he felt that his hands were full of smoothness, his throat violently rolled a few times. His eyes, which had not been conscious for a long time, became hot and slowly rolled down along the red corner of his eyes. He bent his knees and let his robe soak in the pool of blood and mud. He stretched out his hands and wanted to help her up, but he didn't know how to do it. He opened his arms and wanted to hug her, but he didn't know where to put his hands. Finally, he could only lower his head and touch her cold forehead. A drop of hot tears fell on her eyes. "Sorry, Xiao Shu, I'm late. Sorry, don't be afraid, I'll take you home." How could you be injured so easily? TSK, no matter how fierce she pretended to be, she was still a woman. Women needed men to protect them. Seeing that it's rare for you to be so weak, don't worry, I'm here to save you. But this time, you can't accuse me of taking advantage of you. Hee. But no matter how he deliberately provoked her to make her angry, trying to force out her usual fierce and lively appearance, she didn't react this time. She could only weakly open her eyes, silently and sadly looking at him. Her mouth was full of blood. A bad premonition surged in his heart. Shi Yan's expression changed. He gently opened her mouth, and then the world was split into two. "Where's your tongue? Tell me where it is, I'll help you find it." He was like a soulless wild dog, rummaging around on the ground. He laughed foolishly. "Don't worry, I can find it. I can definitely find it. Hui Mo's medical skills are very good. It's not a problem for him to heal the dead. When I find it, I'll ask him to sew it back." "You have such a good mouth, how can you become a mute?" "I won't agree." Zigui reached out and gently pulled him back. Shi Yan trembled. He raised his head and covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook silently. Chapter 484. In the Duke Ning, Princess Hexin was sitting under the oil lamp, quietly lost in thought. She was gently rubbing a string of Buddhist beads in her hand. Suddenly, it fell to the ground with a bang. One of the Buddhist beads broke into two pieces. Princess Hexin panicked and immediately bent down to pick up the Buddhist beads. However, she found that no matter how she tried to piece it back together, she could not put the broken Buddhist beads back together. She looked at the Buddhist beads that had an ominous meaning and was in a daze. Ning Deyuan held her panicked hand and comforted her softly. "Xian, don't be afraid. Shu has Zigui and Pan Gui to protect her. They are the best and most loyal among the secret guards. They will not let anything happen to Shu. You don't have to worry." Under the dim candlelight, Princess Hexin's eyes drifted. "I always have a bad feeling that something is going to happen. Deyuan, tell me, am I doing the right thing?" She grabbed Ning Deyuan's hand and said helplessly, "Shu is so smart. She will definitely find out the truth soon. If she knows, I lied to her. I didn't ask for her permission, and I didn't even tell her the truth. I secretly drugged her soup, erased her memories, and sent her to Nan Yen. If she finds out about these things one day, will she hate me as her mother?" Ning Deyuan held her in his arms and gently stroked her thin back. "Xian, our beloved daughter is not an unreasonable child. On the contrary, she is intelligent, considerate, and considerate. You have taught her well over the years. Even if she does find out about it one day, she will understand our good intentions. In the past few years, I can clearly feel that His Majesty is more and more wary of us. That person has been doing more and more things in the dark. From Shu Er's marriage to Consort Wen's case, old Consort Yu's case, and the case of the Southern Yan's envoy, one after another, they are all moving in the dark. They are becoming more and more unscrupulous, stirring up the entire imperial court. There are only 3 months left until Shu Er's 17th birthday. She will be in danger at any time. We have no choice but to send her away at this time. That child had always been filial. If he told her the truth, how could she agree to leave? Don't feel guilty. Your body is weak, and you've been crying too much these past 2 days. Leaning into her husband's arms, Princess Hshin's eyes became wet again. The huge guilt made it hard for her to breathe. Recently, I often think that if I didn't stop that illness and directly died, maybe the things after that wouldn't have happened. I'm sorry, 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 I'm sorry to all of you. 25 years, it's been 25 years. Duyuan, I'm sorry. Marrying me is the biggest misfortune of your life. Ning Duyuan reached out his warm palm to cover her mouth. Don't say such silly things. If you die, how can we have a future? All these years, you gave me Shu, and Ji, Because of you, I have a family. Meeting you is the luckiest thing that happened to me in my life. In this life, you are my wife. In the next life, you will still be my wife. Duyuan. Princess Hiexian's tears fell and seeped into his palm. All right. You're already the mother of 2 children. Why are you still crying like a little girl? It was the same when we first met. I accidentally bumped into you on the road. I didn't use much force, but you blinked twice and your tears fell. You cried until the tip of your nose turned red. When I saw it, my heart skipped a beat. It's over. There are no girls in my family. I really don't understand how a girl can be so soft. You cry when I touch you. I repeatedly bowed and apologized to you, but you still couldn't stop crying. So I begged you to stop crying. I will definitely take responsibility for you. I didn't expect you to stop crying and scolded me. Where did this lecture come from? Who told you to take responsibility? Scram. Chapter 485. Ning Duyuan laughed as he spoke, causing Hiexian's tears to stop. Her tears turned into laughter. I've been afraid of pain since I was young. If someone touched me, I would get a big bruise on my body and it would hurt for a long time. Who knows how a brute like you would walk without eyes? Wherever I tried to hide, you would bump into me. You even said that you would take responsibility. Aren't you a lecher? What's worse is that after I met you, nothing good happened every time. Ning Duyuan continued to laugh. He held the back of her head and pressed it against his chest. He recalled the past. That's right, I'm a lecher. Once you scolded me, my bones would become frivolous and the more I wanted to be in front of you. When I made you cry, you glared at me and scolded me a few times. My heart was sour and painful, but I couldn't help but feel happy at the same time. Later on, I found out that the reason you loved to cry was not because you were delicate, but because you were born with a constitution. But you were such a person who was afraid of pain. In order to continue my bloodline, you stubbornly insisted on walking to the gates of hell again and again. How can I be grateful and cherish you? Hiexian whispered, meeting you is also the best thing that happened to me in my life. I only hope that our children can be well. As for myself, why should I be afraid of death? Ning Duyuan held her hand. All right, I'll be with you on the road to the Yellow Springs. Now, my little girl, you should rest. Your husband will accompany you. All right, but let's go see Ji first. These 2 days, the little guy was scared to death. I'm afraid he will kick the blanket and cry at night. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. They supported each other as they walked through a winding vermilion corridor. They then stepped on the stones of the stream and walked to the southern courtyard. He Axian hugged Ji-er's soft white body in her arms and coaxed him softly. Ning De-yuen also leaned over and stroked him a few times. He saw Forsythia stumbling all the way over with a pale face. Ning De-yuen blocked Hiaxian's line of sight first. He lifted his chin and ordered Forsythia to walk to the side. He lowered his voice and asked, "Forsythia, why are you so flustered? Did you receive any news?" Forsythia's voice was trembling. "I sent out a carrier pigeon in the evening, but I still haven't received a reply. I waited anxiously at the back door for a long time, and then a little beggar with unkempt hair ran over and gave me this box. Master, look." Ning De-yuen immediately took the box and opened it. He saw a piece of bloody meat inside, followed by a letter written in blood-red characters. The letter was painted with speckles of golden plum blossoms, and in the center of the cluster of plum blossoms were 3 big words, "Begin." When he saw these things clearly, Ning De-yuen immediately closed the box, but he was still a step too late. Hiaxian's footsteps faltered, and she collapsed on the ground. "Xian, don't scare yourself. Maybe the other party purposely set up a trap to scare us. She's tricking us. There's nothing in this box that can prove that something happened to Shu." Princess Hiaxian trembled and clutched her chest tightly. "I have a premonition. I have a premonition since just now. My Shu must have been in trouble. I'm the one who harmed her. I thought I was smart, but I harmed her instead. De-yuen, don't stop me. I'm going to find her. I want to save my daughter. Xian, don't be agitated. I'll go with you." Princess Hiaxian did not listen to anything. She stubbornly broke into the stable and struggled to get on the horse's back. She rushed towards the door, but was surrounded by a group of soldiers. Ning De-yuen caught up and took a closer look. He then shielded Hiaxian behind him. "Oh, it's Eunuch Xiao. I didn't know Eunuch Xiao would come so late at night. Please don't take offense. I wonder why Eunuch Xiao has brought so many brothers to my small public house." Zhao Bin was indifferent to his politeness. He held the imperial edict and ordered, "Princess Hiaxian is bold and presumptuous. She plotted against the royal family. Her crime is unforgivable. The evidence is conclusive. She will be immediately sent to the imperial prison to await her punishment. If she dares to disobey, her whole family will be executed." Chapter 486. The carriage rushed all the way. In order to prevent Ning Shu's wounds from being further torn, Xiahou Qing held her carefully in his arms and refused to let her go for a moment. Outside the carriage, Xiao Zhangping pulled the reins awkwardly. She turned back and said, "On the way here, there is a small town called Baijia Town in front of us. There should be a medical center and an inn. Let's rest there for a while and treat their wounds." Baijia Town was not big. There were no more than 1,000 families. A straight long street connected restaurants, inns, and merchants. Therefore, it was easy to find a medical center. The carriage stopped in front of the clinic. Without thinking, Huimo rushed into the clinic like a gust of wind and plundered all the precious herbs, furnaces, and other things inside. Jussi divided his men into 2 groups and booked the largest inn in Baijia Town. He only received them. Xiahou Qing carried Ning Shu all the way upstairs. He refused to let others take her. He was paranoid. He was afraid that she would be stolen again if he let go. Only Xiao Zhangping and her maid were women. Huimo couldn't defend them. He had to teach Xiao Zhangping how to treat the wounds and asked her to do it for him. Looking at Xiahou Qing, who held Ning Shu's hand and refused to let go, Xiao Zhangping said carefully, "Shitzi, put her down. I can't apply medicine for her like this." Xiaoqing still held her hand tightly and did not let go. Shitzi Xiao. He finally reacted. He kissed Ning Shu's blood-stained fingers and finally spoke for the first time along the way. If you can save her, I'll give you Xiaoqing's life. Ning Shu's body was covered with wounds and pieces of clothes. She was badly mutilated. Xiao Zhangping only glanced at her and then turned around to run away. Seeing her with a pale face, Hui Mo stepped forward and asked, "Princess, can you do it?" Xiao Zhangping said, "It's just applying medicine and bandaging the wounds. What's there to be afraid of?" "I, Xiao Zhangping, am not afraid of anything. You wait outside." She took a deep breath and walked into the house again. Xiao Zhangping looked at the person on the bed who was on her last breath and said in a low voice, "Ning Shu, it was my fault that I drugged you when you weren't paying attention. Now, I'll make up for it. Let's call it even, okay? You mustn't die." She mustered up her courage and walked forward. Together with Hong Fei, they slowly peeled off Ning Shu's clothes and the flesh that was stuck together. Because of the rain, the clots that had already formed into blood clots were torn apart. Ning Shu was awakened by the immense pain. She opened her eyes abruptly. When she saw the stranger in front of her with her empty eyes, the broken images rushed into her mind again. She lost control and shouted, "Ah, ah, 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 ah." Xiaoqing barged in like a gust of wind. "What did you do to her?" Xiao Zhangping was scared silly. He shook his head desperately. I didn't do anything. I was changing her clothes when she suddenly woke up. Then she shouted and didn't let us get close. I swear, I really didn't do anything, really. Believe me. Xiao Shu, don't be afraid. Look at me. It's me, Xiaoqing. Don't be afraid of me, okay? Xiaoqing tried to get closer. But in exchange, Ning Shu struggled even more in fear. After being hurt again and again, she could no longer recognize people. She only saw hordes after hordes of repulsive scourges and ferocious beasts, wandering souls and wild ghosts rushing over to drink her blood, cut her flesh, and left bloody holes on her body one after another. Pain, it really hurts, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts. Don't come over. They are all demons. Demons. Aw, 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 aw. She had no other reaction. She could only scream and struggle with all her might. She allowed more blood to flow out and dye half of the bed. She allowed herself to walk step by step towards the end of her life. Chapter 487. No one knows how to deal with the current situation. Hui Mo hurriedly said, Lady Ning has lost her mind. No one can recognize her. There is no way to apply medicine to her. If this continues, she will die of blood exhaustion before we can touch her wounds. Shitzi, what should we do? Xiaoqing's veins on the back of his hand were exposed. While she was struggling, he hugged her tightly and pressed her acupuncture points. Her limbs couldn't move, but she could still see and move her mouth. She opened her mouth and bit the shoulder of the devil in front of her. Her teeth were deeply embedded in his shoulder bone. Xiao Shu. Xiao Shu. The corners of his eyes were red as he gently held her in his arms. His hand gently rested on the back of her neck as he hesitated whether or not to pinch her until she fainted. However, in the end, he couldn't bear to do so and let her continue to bite his shoulder until her mouth was full of blood. Xiao Zhangping was stunned. Shitzi, you, Xiaoqing shook his head. I can't see, so I won't be rude. I want to stay here with her. Princess, please continue. Xiao Zhangping finally realized that there were some things that she couldn't force in this life. She didn't have time to be sentimental. She blinked away the bitterness in her eyes and called Hong Fei. She hurriedly stepped forward to dress Ning Shu's wounds. After a while, the medicine was finally applied. Ning Shu was exhausted and lost consciousness again. But Xiahou Qing's shoulder had been bitten by her. When Hui Mo came in and saw his shoulder, he took a deep breath. Shitzi. Xiahou Qing didn't care. He frowned and said, "Don't look at me, look at her. How is she now?" "Yes." Hui Mo answered in a low voice and immediately bent down to check her injuries. He also checked her pulse. He frowned and said with difficulty, "Lady Ning's shallow wounds have temporarily stopped bleeding, but the deep wounds are still bleeding. There are no precious medicines in Baijia town. The medicine I made can only solve the urgent problem. As for whether she can safely survive this, maybe, it depends on her luck." What he didn't say was that if someone else had suffered so many injuries, they probably wouldn't have been able to survive. The fact that Ning Shu still had a trace of her mayfly-like aura was already a blessing from the heavens. Xiahou Qing's eyebrows twitched, and he said angrily, "I don't want to hear the word good fortune, and I don't want to resign myself to fate. I only want to hear 3 words, she can live." Hui Mo kneeled on the ground and said, "Your Highness, I will do my best. If I can't save Lady Ning, I'll apologize with my life." Xiahou Qing breathed heavily and slowly closed his eyes. "Get up, Hui Mo. It's me. I forgot myself." He covered his mouth and coughed a few times. Hui Mo's nose twitched, "I know." He got up and took out the medicine and walked to Xiahou Qing. "Your Highness, let me bandage the wound on your shoulder for you. You barely slept for a day and a night, and you need to rest. Don't fall down before Lady Ning recovers. How can a few shallow teeth marks be more poisonous than the plum blossom kiss? This time, I won't leave her half a step. If she wants to live, I'll live with her. If she wants to die, I'll go to hell with her." He held her gently in his hand as if he was holding the clouds in the sky. He didn't eat or drink, and he didn't leave her. In the next 3 days, Ning Shu had a high fever. She wandered in front of the gate of hell again and again. They tried their best to pull her back, but she slipped away again. Occasionally, she woke up with a start. Whenever she saw someone, it was as if she saw her enemy. She struggled desperately and wailed in pain. In that dark rainy night, her faith was completely destroyed. Since then, she didn't know anyone and didn't trust anyone, including Xiahou Qing. "Write whatever you want to say, okay?" He turned around and wiped away his tears. He quickly took out a pen and paper and presented them to Zigui. Zigui took the pen and paper and wrote word by word with difficulty, "I want to explain to young Miss personally. It's not like what that person said. Madam didn't abandon her. On the contrary, she tried her best to protect her. It's all my fault. I didn't protect young Miss well. It's me, it's me." Patter, patter. The thick black ink mixed with her tears and dyed it into an ugly ball. Shi Yan took away the pen in her hand and didn't let her write anymore. "What nonsense are you talking about? You didn't do anything wrong. If you want to say anything wrong, it should be that person. She harmed Shitzi, harmed Lady Ning, and also harmed you. I called myself a godly archer. Why didn't I shoot that person's head that night?" In this round, they seemed to be the losers. No one was spared. Ning Shu's screams of terror rang out again. She had woken up again. Chapter 489. Because her acupoints and consciousness have been sealed again and again, her resistance is particularly fierce this time. She bites and punches desperately. Seeing that she can't break free, she begins to pull her wounds as if she wants to kill herself, which is better than dying in the hands of others. Ning Shu. Lady Ning. Everyone rushes in, but they don't know what to do. Hui Mo can't bear it, but he has to harden his heart and say, "Young master, how about sealing it again?" Before he finishes his words, he sees Xiao Qing's black hair suddenly scatters. In Hui Mo's shocked eyes, he puts the white jade hairpin into Ning Shu's hand and aims at his chest. "Xiao Shu, listen to me. I don't care if you know me or not, but I want you to remember that I will never hurt you like those people. If you don't believe me, just try it." Ning Shu, who is in a breakdown, is stunned for a moment. Then she grabs the jade hairpin and stabs it into Xiao Qing's ribs without hesitation. Instantly, blood blooms. Hui Mo and others want to rush over to stop her, but Xiao Qing raises his hand to stop them. "Go on." There is even a slight arc at the corner of his mouth. "Whether once, twice, or countless times, I will never fight back, because Xiao Qing will never hurt Ning Shu, never." But she doesn't understand his promise. She holds the blood-stained jade hairpin, pulls it out from under his ribs, and then stabs it deeply. Hui Mo's scalp is numb. He can't describe it with words. Crazy, crazy, these two people are crazy. 1, 2, 3, 4. The jade hairpin with the pattern of white crane wings is soaked in blood. It is thick, hot, and red. She trembles all over. The hazy, disordered, and terrifying world in front of her is suddenly burned with a hole. Slowly, slowly, his vague figure appears. Who is this person? He is wearing a beautiful moon-white dress and looks like an immortal. But his shoulders and chest are full of blood. Some are bitten, and some are just stabbed. There are so many wounds. He looks so miserable as her. Did she stab him? Why doesn't he hide? He just said, he will never hurt her. No, don't believe him. This person is just the incarnation of a devil. He wants to cheat her trust, and then after she gives her heart to him, he will step on her heart fiercely. Under the ninth heaven, everyone is the same. Her eyes are red with hatred. She raises the jade hairpin again and stabs at the man's heart. But just as the jade hairpin pierced through his clothes, cut through his skin, and was about to pierce through his beating heart, she suddenly shuddered, and then couldn't pierce any further. Ah! The jade hairpin fell to the ground and broke into 2 pieces. She held her head in pain and fainted. Xiao Qing's expression changed drastically as he hugged her. "Little Shu." "Xiao." Everyone suddenly panicked. Hui Mo rushed out and prepared to take the medicine bag. Suddenly, he saw a travel-worn figure rushing in from outside the inn. A large rock finally fell. He floated over like a gust of wind and carried the person up from the bottom of the building. "Mr. Duan, you're finally here. Come and save me." Duan Chongfeng's old bones almost fell apart as he straddled the horse's back. Then Hui Mo lifted him up and carried him on a cloud. His stomach was churning and he could only sigh that he was getting old and no longer had the elegant demeanor of the past. "No rush, no rush. Let me take a look." When she was finally placed on the ground, the old man wiped his sweat and leaned over to take a look. His expression was extremely grave. How did this girl get injured to this extent? Knowing that the situation was serious, he didn't hesitate for a moment. His hands were like lightning and his eyes were like torches. He placed 2 rows of silver needles on his chest and helped Ning Shu to calm down. He wrote another prescription and asked Hui Mo to boil it quickly. Finally, hearing Ning Shu's calm breathing, Xiao Qing closed his eyes and exhaled a long breath. He stood up and solemnly bowed to Duan Chongfeng. "Thank you for taking the risk to inform me that Ning Shu was hiding in the convoy. Today, you came in time to save Ning Shu's life. Please accept my gratitude. Back then, at the foot of the White Wolf Mountain, Zhang Xian had saved Zhang Xian when he was severely injured. Back then, Zhang Xian had merely tossed him a jar of wine and thanked him casually. But now, because of Ning Shu, he could put down his most precious pride as the crown prince of Nanping. Duan Changfeng couldn't help but sigh endlessly. He casually waved his hand, and his eyes, which had become increasingly cloudy after experiencing the wind and sand, fell on Ning Shu, who was fast asleep on the bed. It was long and misty, as if he was looking at another person he hadn't seen for many years and deeply missed. Even if Wu asks, I will definitely cure her. After all, I have a great relationship with her. Chapter 490. She's awake. Lady Ning is awake. Under everyone's nervous, expectant, and fearful eyes, Ning Shu slowly opened her eyes. This time, she didn't scream like before. After glancing around with fear, she grabbed the quilt and curled herself up, still resisting everyone. Until she saw Xiao Qing, she suddenly ran down from the bed with bare ankles and hid behind him. Xiao Zhangping walked over and called, Ning Shu. Ning Shu. You need to change the medicine on your body. Let me change it for you, okay? Ning Shu didn't respond at all, she hid behind Xiao Qing again. Why does her behavior seem a bit childish? Where is the wisdom she used to have? Xiao Zhangping took a few steps closer and said to Xiao Qing, what's the matter with her? Is she better or not? If she's not better, she's no longer screaming crazily. If she's better, she's still resisting outsiders. Oh, except for Xiao Qing. She just said a few words to Xiao Qing, but Ning Shu suddenly ran out from behind him, pushed her away, and then held Xiao Qing's arm tightly. Xiao Zhangping was pushed and staggered, and said angrily, what's wrong with you? Don't think that I won't care about you just because you're sick. Ning Shu seemed to be angered by Xiao Zhangping's bad attitude. She angrily glared at her, and then hid behind Xiao Qing again. Xiao Qing couldn't see, so he naturally didn't know Ning Shu's little trick. He only thought that she was scared again, so he frowned and protected her in his arms, and said with some dissatisfaction, Princess, she's sick. Was he blaming her? Xiao Zhangping was even more angry, and Hui Mo hurriedly pulled her to the side to persuade her. Duan Changfeng circled Ning Shu for a whole circle, and his silk thread flew out to check her pulse, and said in surprise, this shouldn't be. The medicine I use shouldn't have this effect. Xiao Qing frowned. Mr. Duan, what's wrong with her? Duan Changfeng thought for a moment and said, I don't know what went wrong. However, this girl probably only had the mind of a child. Because Your Highness didn't want to hurt her before, she only lowered her guard towards Your Highness. So, in order to ensure that she can continue to receive treatment with peace of mind, Your Highness will have to take care of her for a period of time. How old is the child? Even though Xiao Qing had a strong mental fortitude, he couldn't help but reveal a stunned expression. Xiao Zhangping, who was as angry as a toad, was amused. Ha, Ning Shu, to think that there would be a day when you would become stupid. What goes around comes around. All right, this princess is magnanimous and won't bicker with you. Come, hurry up and let this princess condescend to give you another dose of medicine. Once you've recovered, you won't have this blessing anymore. Xiao Zhangping was rarely so magnanimous, but she didn't expect that Ning Shu didn't appreciate it at all. She angrily glared at her again, and even grabbed something to throw at her. Xiao Zhangping was once again angry like a quail. Xiao Qing bent down, and unfamiliarly but gently comforted her. Xiao Shu, we won't apply the medicine first. You should be hungry. I ordered people to prepare your favorite food. Ning Shu raised her bandaged arm in front of him. Hand, hurts. Xiao Zhangping rolled her eyes, sneered and muttered, "Oh, your hand hurts. Yesterday, when you stabbed Xiahou Shizi with the jade hairpin, you were so ruthless, how could your hand not hurt? If Xiahou Shizi falls for this kind of stupid trick, then the sun will rise from the west." Xiahou Qing understood, "Your hand hurts, so you can't hold the chopsticks, right? Huema, ask the cook to come here." Ning Shu became anxious and said loudly, "You feed me." "But I can't see." Ning Shu stubbornly said, "You feed me." Xiahou Qing had no choice but to bend the corner of his mouth indulgently. "Xiao Shu, don't worry." "Okay." Xiao Zhangping's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. She angrily turned around and rushed out of the door. Although Baijia town was small, unexpectedly, the cook here made a good dish. Although it couldn't be compared with the chefs in the capital, it had a different taste. The meal was divided into 2 tables. Xiahou Qing and Ning Shu sat alone at a table, and the others sat at another table. Xiao Zhangping poked at the rice while watching Xiahou Qing feed Ning Shu the food bit by bit. She chewed the rice grains with her teeth, as if she couldn't wait to chew Ning Shu into pieces like the rice grains in her mouth. How old was her mind? How could her hand hurt so much that she couldn't eat? Wasn't it Ning Shu who chose her favorite food and put it in the bowl, and then stuffed it into Xiahou Qing's hand, waiting for him to feed her spoon by spoon? Superfluous. She was obviously scheming. What was she doing? What was she doing? She had already taken a bite of the cherry cake, but she still sent it to Xiahou Shizi's mouth. Her fingers touched Xiahou Shizi's lips, and she said something, "It's delicious. You should try it too." The most excessive thing was that Xiahou Shizi paused. His throat rolled slightly, and then he opened his mouth and ate it without any hesitation. It was as if the other people present didn't exist. Xiao Zhangping gritted her teeth and didn't taste the food. She put down the bowl and said, "I'm full." Huema looked at her bowl and blinked. "Princess, you only ate a few mouthfuls." Xiao Zhangping, "I'm full of anger. I won't be hungry even if I don't eat for 3 days. Chapter 491. After a few days of not eating, Ning Shu's spirit was obviously much better. A thin layer of blood finally appeared on her cheeks, but her lips were still dim and almost transparent. No matter how he coaxed and persuaded, Ning Shu refused to let anyone get close to her other than Xiahou Qing. She was like a little tail that couldn't be shaken off. As long as he was 10 feet away from her, she would cry non-stop. Duan Chongfeng couldn't figure out the reason at the moment, so he pulled Hui Mo to study the prescription together. After all, Ning Shu was weak. After a while, she hugged Xiahou Qing's arm and fell asleep. Hong Fei and the others immediately took the opportunity to bring a basin of water to change her medicine and wipe her skin. Xiahou Qing got up to avoid suspicion, but found that his hand was tightly held by her. As long as he moved slightly, Ning Shu showed signs of waking up. Xiahou Qing had to let her hold his hand and turned his face to the side. For the first time, Xiahou Shizi, who had always been indifferent and strategizing, showed an embarrassed expression. "You guys, continue. Just pretend that I don't exist." Hong Fei and the others also looked at each other awkwardly, but time was pressing and they didn't have time to think about it. They undressed her, wiped her clothes, applied medicine, and changed her clothes for fear that Ning Shu would wake up at any time. Separated by a thin layer of gauze, she was in the gauze and he was outside the gauze. One of his fingers was slender with distinct joints, and the other was slender and soft as if boneless, tightly intertwined with each other. In front of his eyes was still a sheet of darkness. He could not distinguish the colors of the world, the light and the shadows, but his ears could hear. He could hear the sound of her clothes being removed layer by layer through the veil that was like smoke. He could hear the sound of a cloth carefully wiping her body. He could hear the medicine bottle being opened and gently applied to her skin. After she felt a little pain, she softly moaned, like an oriole sobbing. At the same time, she gripped his hand even more tightly, as if she was asking for help. Previously, Ning Shu's life had been hanging by a thread and she had been on the brink of death. In his desperation, he had no time to care about the etiquette between men and women. He had only one thought in his mind: I can't let her die, I want her to live. But now, with the passage of time, the suppressed reverie was like a horse returning to the forest, unrestrained and unrestrained. Xiahou Qing's other hand on his knee clenched silently, and a layer of red color spread from the bottom to the top of his ear, but he forcibly suppressed it, so that no one noticed his loss of self-control. When the medicine was finally applied with great difficulty, Hong Fei and the others were all sweating profusely. They hurriedly took the cold water basins and left. After they left and the door closed, Xiahou Qing let out a long sigh of relief. He turned around and smiled bitterly. He leaned over her ear and listened to her even and obedient breathing. He whispered, "Xiao Shu, I won't go. Can you let go?" Ning Shu, who was sleeping, seemed to have heard him. She frowned and grunted in displeasure, as if expressing her strong resistance. What could Xiahou Qing do? Of course, there was nothing he could do. It was the first time in his life that he felt so helpless. Perhaps he owed her a lot in his previous life, so he was destined to repay her in this life. What could he do to her? He could only tolerate her, indulge her, love her, and pity her. He leaned over and stopped in front of her forehead for a short while, but stopped halfway. His voice was low and indulgent. "Well, since you don't want to let go, you can hold on. No matter when you want to hold on to these hands, and how long you want to hold on to them, it's up to you." Ning Shu was finally satisfied. She grabbed his hand and gently rubbed it against her cheek, and then fell asleep again. Previously, he had been in the same room with her because she had been in a state of chaos and had lost her mind. Now that she had woken up, although she only had the mind of a child, it was still inappropriate for them to be in the same bed without any taboo. So he called Zhou Sihui and Mog to get a screen in the middle of the bed, separating the two of them. Only a gap was left under the screen, allowing the two intertwined hands to pass through. The early summer wind was warm and intoxicating. The shadows of the trees swayed gently, and the moon was high in the sky. For many days, Xiahou Qing, who had stretched himself to the limit with only his willpower, could finally relax. In this warm wind, with her light breathing, he slowly fell asleep. The moonlight fell on his face. It was like jade and porcelain. It was so quiet that no one could bear to break it. Suddenly, something approached in the dark. 5 fingers clawed at his heart. He suddenly woke up and waved his sleeves like a dragon, fiercely pinching the other party's neck. Chapter 492. His hand was like a pair of pliers. As long as he exerted a little more strength, he could easily pinch her neck into 2 pieces. Until he heard a familiar sound. Xiao Shu. His heart skipped a beat. He immediately released his hand and regained his consciousness. Ning Shu covered her ravaged neck and subconsciously stepped back a few steps. But when she remembered that this person would never hurt her, she hesitated and stopped there. She was in a dilemma whether she should approach or retreat. Finally, she complained, "It hurts, it hurts." A drop of spring water fell into the ice pool and instantly melted the ice and snow. He said, "I'm sorry. I was very alert after I fell asleep. I hurt you. Xiao Shu, are you okay?" Hui Mo. He was about to call Hui Mo to treat her when she suddenly covered his mouth. Her hands hesitated for a moment. She held his hand and gently stopped it on her neck. Blow it. It's okay. Under the moonlight, her clear eyes looked at him seriously. It seemed that as long as he coaxed her a little, she would reluctantly forgive his mistake. Such a soft and obedient voice was like a snow-white cat. It screamed in front of others but relied on him wholeheartedly. It rolled around and acted like a spoiled child. Feeling the soft skin in his palm, Xiahou Qing's palm, which was cooler than ordinary people, was hot. It was so hot that his palm was slightly sweaty. He didn't know if it was because the summer night breeze was too warm, or if it was because his heart was beating too fast, but a single spark ignited a prairie fire. He never knew that his willpower would be so weak that it would collapse after being lightly scratched by the cat's claws. Ning Shu grabbed his hand and rubbed it for a moment. He took back his hand and forcibly suppressed the impatience in his heart. He said, "It's so late. Xiao Shu, why are you still awake? Why are you looking for me?" Ning Shu's hand was rubbed well. Her hand was empty. She was a little dissatisfied and said, "I'm scared. I want to sleep with you." The flame that had been suppressed was suddenly poured with a bucket of oil. With a boom, it engulfed the entire wasteland. Xiahou Qing could not help but be absent-minded in that instant. His breathing became disordered, and he did not move for a long time. But this person who was adding fuel to the fire actually came to add fuel to the fire. Her two black mercury-like eyes stuck to his body under the bright moonlight. She curiously stretched out her finger and pointed at his jade-colored face and neck. Her face was red. Neck, red. Xiahou Qing bounced away as if he had been electrocuted and grabbed her naughty fingers. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse. He kept reminding himself that she only had the mind of a few years old, so how could he take her words to heart? He repeated this sentence 10 times in his mind before he managed to find a trace of clarity. "You're a woman and I'm a man. Sleeping in the same room is already an exception. If we were to sleep in the same bed, it would be even more unreasonable. Little Shu, be good. I'm right here, just a screen away from you. If you're scared, just call me. I won't dare to not answer. Is that okay?" "Not good." "Scared." "Not good." "I'll sleep with you. I'll sleep with you." Ning Shu was anxious. She fiercely resisted. This kind of Ning Shu made Xiahou Qing feel a lingering fear. "Little Shu, put your hand down. Don't touch your wound." But she was like a spoiled child who had grasped his weakness. The more he was worried about something, the more she would do the opposite, even if the price was to hurt herself. Holding Ning Shu tightly in his arms, Xiahou Qing had a headache. In the end, he was helpless to indulge her. Having obtained Xiahou Qing's tacit approval, she finally revealed a satisfied and sly smile. She pressed him down and then lifted a corner of the quilt. She slowly wormed her way in like a cat, going from his waist to his chest. She then rested her little face on his chest. He. Chapter 493. Her blue silk-like hair slowly intertwined with his, covering half the bed. They were intimately entwined with each other. In his arms, her body was tightly pressed against his body. There were only 2 thin layers of silk between their bodies. Her moist breath gently brushed against his collarbone. Xiahou Qing's mind exploded. The 300 sutras were no match for her light laughter. He almost forgot himself as he pulled her off his body. Then, he used a thin layer of cloth to wrap her tightly and pressed her to his side. He slept with his clothes on and said in a low voice, "Sleep." Ning Shu was wrapped into a cocoon. She struggled for a long time and found that she couldn't get out. Finally, she gave up. She tried her best to move towards Xiaoqing. Only when she was a little closer to him did she finally stop. Feeling her small face pressed against his arm, Xiaoqing's breathing became normal. His palms silently clenched into a fist. Just now, there was a moment when he almost couldn't control himself. He almost used all of his strength to force himself to pull her away, and not. Xiaoqing inwardly smiled bitterly. Xiao Shu, do you know that this is too torturous for me? In front of you, how can I be Madame Lu's disciple? For a moment, no one spoke. There were only two breaths, one heavy and one shallow. After a long time, he finally suppressed his thousands of thoughts. Xiaoqing said in a low voice, "Why aren't you sleeping?" The summer wind seemed to be naturally dense with a thin layer of water vapor. In this ink-like sticky night, her eyes were bright and persistent. Beautiful. What's beautiful? Ning Shu didn't even think before blurting out, "You're beautiful." After saying this, as if to express the sincerity of her words, she solemnly added, "The most beautiful." Xiaoqing's lips curved faintly. A moment later, the curve was flattened. He said, "Is it just beautiful? If you put me and your fiancé together, who would you choose?" Ning Shu blinked her eyes in confusion. She didn't understand what a fiancé was. Had she eaten it before? But that didn't stop her from giving the right answer, "I want you." He asked again, "Compared to your childhood sweetheart?" She said resolutely, "I want you." Her two unhesitant answers pleased him. He leaned over and gently stroked her soft hair. "Why? Is it only because I'm good-looking?" She seemed to understand this question a little. She thought for a while and then said seriously, "Good. It's best if you don't hurt me." Such a childish answer made Xiaoqing chuckle. What kind of answer did he expect her to give now? This was already the best, wasn't it? Ning Shu didn't know the faint sadness in his heart. She closed her eyes and enjoyed his touch, like a kitten asking for a pet. But before she could enjoy it enough, the hand suddenly stopped. She anxiously pushed herself closer to his palm, as if urging him, "Why did you stop? Carry on, carry on." She heard the owner of the hand suddenly say, "What if one day I hurt you? Will all my good things become bad?" This question was too complicated, completely beyond her current thinking. She was completely stunned. She foolishly tilted her head and looked at him. She didn't know how to answer to make him happy. She could only randomly emphasize, "You're not bad, you're not bad." Xiaoqing continued to softly say, "Xiao Shu, do you know that for a moment, I actually thought, if you can't recover your memories and continue to live like a simple child, it might not be a bad thing. Because I'm good to you, it's easy to believe a person. Is it easy to forget a person after waking up from a dream? This way, when I go to the Yellow Springs in the future, you can forget me as soon as possible and meet the next person who treats you well. You can live a happy life." Ning Shu was frightened by him like this. Her hands were entangled in the quilt and she anxiously bit his clothes with her mouth, indicating that he shouldn't say any more. She didn't understand, she was afraid. Feeling her helplessness, Xiaoqing came back to his senses and softly coaxed, "Xiao Shu, don't be afraid. I was just joking with you. I won't leave you alone. Be good, it's late and you're tired. You can only recover if you sleep well. When you recover, I'll take you out to play, okay?" Ning Shu was very easy to coax. When she heard that he could take her out to play, her eyes lit up. She nodded vigorously and closed her eyes. She chose a comfortable position on his chest and obediently fell asleep. Perhaps she was really tired. Soon, he heard her even breathing. It was as if she really became a child. She was gently smacking her lips in her sleep. Xiahou Qing slowly laughed. He fumbled with her loosened quilt and gently stroked her head. You're so easy to coax. In the future, when I'm not here, what will you do if you're deceived? This night was no different from any other night to him. It was so quiet that he opened his eyes and looked at the night in front of him until the day came. Chapter 494. Shiziyi, this is a secret letter from 2 days ago. Jiu Si presented a sealed letter to Xiahou Qing with a serious expression. Duke Ning is in trouble. Lady Ning's mother and Princess Axayan have been sent to prison by imperial edict. They are waiting for His Majesty to deal with them. Duke Ning's 270 people have been detained. No one is allowed to take a step out. The crime is plotting rebellion. Xiahou Qing immediately frowned and his expression darkened. When did this happen? Why are you only telling me now? It happened on the day Lady Ning woke up. The situation was too chaotic. Shiziyi was so focused on saving Lady Ning that you didn't even care about yourself. I acted on my own initiative and didn't report this to you. Please punish me. Xiahou Qing couldn't bear to punish him. I don't blame you. Immediately report the cause of this matter and the current situation. Yes. This matter started from 7 days ago at the farewell banquet of Southern Yen. That day, Huima and I accompanied Shiziyi to the banquet. At the banquet, His Majesty suddenly became interested and proposed a marriage between Princess Royal Xiao Mingshue's only legitimate daughter and Princess Rui. Princess Royal refused several times and finally chose 6th Prince Xiao Yuni among the princes. At that time, Prince Ku and Princess Royal met in private. The scene of him strongly opposing the marriage was still vivid in his ears. Jiu Si continued. After Prince Ku left the banquet, he turned around and rushed to Xiangji Mountain. He wanted to become a monk. After he left, the monks fished out a fish from the pond. In the belly of the fish, there was a book, female lead Han Wang. Moreover, this news spread like wildfire throughout the capital. In just a short 4 hours, it caused an uproar and caused a storm in the city. Princess Royal hurriedly brought Princess Rui into the palace. They knelt in front of the palace and confessed to His Majesty to prove their innocence. After closing the palace door and talking for a long time, His Majesty calmed down and seemed to have been convinced. He ordered them not to worry and to return to their residence. Now that the matter had reached this point, it could be said that the wind had stopped and the rain had stopped. Everyone thought that they had temporarily passed the crisis. But no one would have thought that when the eldest princess and her family were on their way back to the palace, they would suddenly bump into an ox cart that had gone out of control. The bull's eyes were red and full of evil. It charged straight at the princess carriage. Dozens of people couldn't stop it and crashed into the princess carriage. When the imperial bodyguards killed the mad bull on the spot and straightened the carriage, they found that the young Canton princess had been stabbed in the chest and was no longer breathing. Xiahou Qing tapped his fingers lightly and said while thinking, how many people were in the carriage at that time? Didn't you make any noise when it happened? The prince consort had other matters to attend to, so he rode his horse first. At that time, the people sitting in the carriage were the eldest princess and the young princess, as well as a personal nanny. When the ox cart suddenly charged out, the people in the carriage were frightened and screamed. At the same time, the ox was also howling crazily, knocking down the stalls on the side of the road. The passers-by covered their heads and ran in all directions, colliding with the imperial bodyguards, making the scene even more chaotic. No one noticed when the nobles in the carriage stopped screaming. When the matter was settled, the imperial bodyguards opened the curtain and found that the eldest princess and nanny had fainted. The young Canton princess was dead. The case was so suspenseful that Xiahou Qing tapped his fingers even faster. What kind of weapon pierced through the young Canton princess' chest? Is there any evidence? The imperial physician did a careful examination of the wound and determined that it was a pair of scissors. But after the murderer finished the case, the weapon was quickly taken away. Since there was an ox cart, there must be a driver. Where is the driver? Dead. The officials followed the clues and immediately found out the identity of the driver. They led people to his house, and when they opened the door, they saw a floor full of corpses. The 5 people in that family all committed suicide. The bloody scissors were hidden in the cellar of his house. Xiahou Qing said, "Since the truth has been revealed, what is the connection between this case and young Canton Princess Heartwarming?" After the eldest princess woke up, she hugged young Canton Princess Heartwarming's corpse and cried non-stop. She knelt and begged His Majesty to investigate thoroughly. The matter has become so troublesome that it can't be cleaned up. His Majesty ordered the Ministry of Justice, the Supreme Court, and the Jiangji Prefecture to investigate overnight and found 2 clues. First, the family was poor in the early years. The family almost starved to death. They had received long-term financial support from young Canton Princess Heartwarming. Second, the day before Prince Ku made a scene in Xiangtiku Mountain and the case of the hidden books in the fish belly, young Canton Princess Heartwarming went to Xiangtiku Mountain to release the animals to worship Buddha. Among the animals released, there were 12 carps. Chapter 495. A carp, a mad cow, a pair of scissors, and 6 corpses. The case was twisted and turned into a hair-raising circle that made one's blood run cold. Xiahou Qing's face showed that he was deep in thought. What is Princess Heartwarming's motive? Don't tell me no one doubts this. Everyone knew that Princess Heartwarming was weak and sickly. She spent most of her time recuperating in her manor. She didn't even attend the banquets of the noble families. For such a person who stood aloof from worldly affairs to suddenly be the mastermind of such a big case and offend the entire imperial family, it was simply inconceivable. Jiao Si paused and said, right after Princess Heartwarming was taken to the prison, a notice suddenly appeared on the bulletin board in front of the Meridian Gate. I don't know where it came from. There was a secret written on it. 20 years ago, Princess Heartwarming was Empress Zhou's adopted daughter. This notice only existed for a short time before it was torn up by the officials. However, it had already spread among the common people. They all said that the recent cases were all done by Princess Heartwarming. Her purpose was to avenge Empress Zhou's lingering spirit. Xiahou Qing's knuckles suddenly stopped tapping on the chopping board. His brows gradually formed a knot. A series of footsteps could be heard. Xiahou Qing's ears moved slightly. He immediately raised his hand to signal Jiao Si to stop. Sure enough, not long after, a blue figure pounced over and crashed into his arms. Her grievance and rebuke were in his ears. You're here. What are you talking about? Ignore me. Jiao Si tactfully retreated. Then he heard his usually cold and decisive Shitzi lower his voice and coax a child. Nothing. I was just talking about a small matter with Jiao Si. She was somewhat unhappy. No. You lied to me. I didn't lie to you. It really was a small matter. Facing her current state, how could he tell her the truth? Even if he did, with her current state of mind, it would be difficult for her to understand. Ning Shu was even more unhappy. She reached out and poked his forehead. You lied to me. Here, it's wrinkled. Xiahou Qing couldn't help but laugh. He gently held her fingertips. You're as sharp as ever. He recalled the footsteps just now, which were obviously different. By the way, why are you walking barefoot? He bent down and grabbed her ankle. Sure enough, his judgment was correct. Soon after, he revealed a displeased expression. Ning Shu immediately withdrew her ankle guiltily. Hong Fei and the others finally caught up with them, panting. Every one of them was dripping wet and in a sorry state. Lady Ning, please spare us. Quickly follow us back to take a bath. Don't torture us anymore. Otherwise, we will die young. Hong Fei couldn't help but shed bitter tears for herself. Didn't she just help her family's princess light a handful of sleeping incense that day? Why was this debt so hard to repay? Could this be retribution? Xiao Zhangping, with his wet hair, flew into a rage. Ning Shu, what do you want to do? This princess has lived for 15 years, and this is the first time I've bathed and changed someone's clothes. You actually don't appreciate it. Don't think that this princess won't dare to do anything to you just because you're sick. Xiao Qing, who understood the reason, coldly said, Little Shu. Hearing Xiao Qing's reprimanding voice, Ning Shu shrunk back with a guilty conscience. Then, she raised her head and complained, No, you are annoying. Xiao Zhangping glared, Then who do you want? Ning Shu's eyes swept over the three maids facing the princess. Finally, she turned and pointed, him. For a moment, everyone's faces were full of wonderful expressions. The maids' cheeks all turned red, and they avoided arousing suspicion. Xiao Zhangping's eyes almost popped out, You wish. Xiao Shizi, quickly tell her that she's delusional. Xiao Qing's ears were dyed red all the way to the base of his ears. He clenched his fists and coughed a few times. The princess has worked hard. Your Highness, please rest for a while. Red Rumored String understood and immediately winked at the people around her, pulling Xiao Zhangping away. Your Highness, this servant will serve you to rest first. By the way, your hair is wet, quickly let this servant comb it for you. There's no need to comb it, there's no need. Ning Shu, don't be delusional. After Xiao Zhangping was half dragged and half carried away, the others tactfully followed. Finally, only the two of them were left in front of the fan-shaped window lattice. Ahem. Xiao Qing awkwardly coughed twice and finally said helplessly, Little Shu, next time, you can't say such a joke in front of others. What if people take it seriously? Ning Shu jumped up, No, it's a joke, I want you to wash it. You wash it. As she spoke, she ignored everything and directly took off her belt in front of him. Chapter 496. With a hushio sound, the smooth belt floated to the ground. There was the sound of silk sliding across skin in the wind, like a butterfly's lips gently kissing a flower. Xiao Qing immediately stood up and took off his outer robe to wrap it around her body. Ning Shu, you. He angrily wanted to ask, Where is your brain? Do you know what you are doing? But when the words came to his mouth, he swallowed them back down. His impatience turned into a helpless sigh. He pressed down hard on her shoulder and said with a bitter smile, Ning Shu, are you punishing me? Do you know that this is the most severe punishment in the world for me? You have injuries on your body that haven't healed yet, so you can't bathe and change your clothes. You need someone to help you so that your wounds won't be soaked. But as a man, I can't bathe for you. He had thought highly of himself for many years. He thought that there were no more than 3 things in the world that could make it difficult for him. He never thought that the most difficult thing would be facing her at this moment. He took a deep breath and ignored the burning in his ears. He continued, My eyes are damaged, so I can't do anything. If you are really afraid, I can. I can cover the outside of the bath with a white veil. I can sit behind the white veil with you. That way, if you want to see me, you can just raise your head. How about it? Ning Shu unhappily pouted, but she could guess that this was his bottom line. If she continued to cause trouble, she might even lose this. So she snorted a few times and finally reluctantly agreed. After being released, Ning Shu put on her robe and walked barefoot to the bath. Xiahou Qing pulled her back and said with a headache. Xiao Shu, put on your clothes. Ning Shu looked back in confusion. She picked up the belt and tied it around her body. After tying it for a long time, she finally managed to tie it and continued to walk barefoot. Xiahou Qing had been in the court for 21 years and finally understood the meaning of helplessness. He sighed and picked her up by the waist. Tell me how many steps to walk in this direction. Leaning against his chest, Ning Shu was extremely beautiful. She smiled as she grabbed his collar and pressed her face against his chest. She was his eyes, and he was her feet. They walked down the stairs step by step, and under everyone's surprised and snickering gazes, they walked towards the direction of the bathhouse. A bathing pool and a chessboard, separated by a thin layer of gauze. Ning Shu overcame her great fear and allowed the maids to carefully scrub her. Her eyes stared unblinkingly at him behind the thin layer of gauze. Occasionally, she would call out his name and receive his response. It was as if he had drawn great courage and energy from this short "then, I'm here." He sat cross-legged on the 19 lines of latitude and longitude, placing the black and white pieces one by one. He was as steady as Mount Tai, as if he was not disturbed by anything. Hong Fei could not help but sigh inwardly, as expected of the heir of Xiahou. He can still keep his heart as still as water in such a situation. Such determination is really admirable. After the bath, Hong Fei and others hurriedly took the opportunity to change the medicine for Ning Shu again in order to prevent further trouble. It was almost an hour when they finally finished everything. After packing Ning Shu, who exuded a faint medicinal fragrance after the bath, Hong Fei retreated. Sure enough, once she was free, Ning Shu immediately threw herself at Xiahou Qing, as if she had been greatly wronged by them. At the very least, this heir of Xiahou could clearly not see, but he could accurately stretch out his arm and catch her every time. After Hong Fei reported, she hurriedly left with the rest of the maids. She couldn't stand it, she couldn't stand it. She had served the masters in the palace for half of her life and had changed 3 masters. She thought that those masters were already difficult to deal with, but she didn't expect that this Lady Ning was the most terrible one. The most unbearable thing was not this. She had suffered hardships, sweets, and grievances. She had tasted enough of everything, but she had never tasted such suffocating PDA. She didn't hesitate to look and quickly escaped. Chapter 497. Taking Ning Shu into his arms, Xiahou Qing put down the chess piece in his hand and supported her unstable body. He said helplessly, "You are a girl. You can't throw yourself into a man's arms casually. Do you understand?" Especially after bathing and changing clothes, he was worried. If one day he was gone and her mind was still like this, what should he do? Hugging his neck, Ning Shu asked confusedly, "What is a man?" Xiahou Qing, the crown prince of Nanping, had read a lot of books since he was a child. It seemed that there was nothing that could baffle him. However, he hesitated on this question. He pondered for a moment and said, "A man is like me. There is also Huema, Jussi, Shi Yan, the owner of this inn, the servant, and so on. They are all men." Ning Shu let go of his hand. Her eyes carefully lingered on herself and him. She used her hand to gesture, "Tall. There are also shorter ones." She had always been observant. Her finger gently tapped on the bulge in his throat. "This, you have. Ahem, there are also some men who are not obvious. You can't distinguish them so easily." Ning Shu looked around carefully, and her eyes finally fell on her chest. She suddenly realized what was going on and grabbed his hand and pressed it on her chest. I know. You, here, are thin, I am fat. The feathers of the oriole gently swept over the plump pomegranate flower outside the window. Xiaoqing almost lost his composure and pulled back his palm, pressing it hard on his knee. His jade-colored face flushed in panic. Xiao Shu. You, Ning Shu tilted her head. She felt very strange. She couldn't understand why he was angry again. Could it be that men were the kind who liked to be angry? Getting angry with her was simply asking for trouble. Xiaoqing covered his face and was silent for a moment. Finally, he sighed, what you just said is not wrong. You just have to remember that men and women are not allowed to sit together when they are 7 years old. Some men are good in nature, but some are bad. The human heart was complex and unpredictable, and could not be distinguished by appearance. Moreover, one should not easily believe their honeyed words and righteous words. One must feel it with one's heart. Only when you have truly chosen a man that you believe in wholeheartedly can you be intimate with him and spend the rest of your life with him. Do you understand? Ning Shu nodded her head in confusion. He didn't know if she really understood or if she was faking it, but she turned around and threw herself into his arms again. After teaching for a long time without seeing any effect, Xiaoqing had a headache and smiled bitterly. He rubbed her damp hair that had not been dried yet. What I said just now, you still. Forget it, forget it. I was too demanding. Ning Shu said in her heart, I understand, but I've already chosen the man I trust wholeheartedly, which is you. Why can't we be intimate with each other? Men were really hard to understand. Her gaze fell on the chessboard beside him and curiously asked, what is it? Teach me. When she was bathing, he had been playing chess and did not have time to pay attention to her. Humph. She wanted to see what was so fun about it. Xiaoqing said, oh, this is Go. The chessboard is square, and there are 19 vertical and horizontal lines intersecting to form 361 intersections. The black and white pieces compete with each other. Ning Shu picked up a black piece and said, put it, where? Every piece lands on the intersections. The one with more empty spots wins. Ning Shu blinked and was puzzled. She pointed to 3 or 4 scattered pieces and said, not there. Put it on. Xiaoqing was embarrassed for the second time today. He would not tell Ning Shu the reason why he only failed this time. Thus, he coughed twice and got up. You just finished bathing and your hair is not dry yet. The sun is bright outside so it dries faster. I'll take you out for a walk. We'll play tomorrow. Chapter 498. When Ning Shu heard that he wanted to take her out to play, she was a bit excited and a bit scared. She hesitated and said, go out. Xiao Shu, are you afraid that there will be too many people outside? Ning Shu lowered her head and forcefully dug into her fingers, her body slightly trembling. After not hearing her response for a while, Xiaoqing understood her meaning. He pulled her into his embrace and slowly and firmly said, remember, with me here, I won't let what happened that night happen again. I won't let anyone hurt you at all. No one. There are many new and interesting things outside, as well as many delicious foods. I can buy you anything you want to eat. If you're really afraid of the people outside, we'll immediately come back. Xiao Shu, let's go out and try it out, okay? Ning Shu's tense body slowly relaxed under his comforting words. She gave a soft "n" sound, as if she was no longer afraid. Ning Shu's cat-like chin rubbed against his shoulder and accidentally rubbed against the wound that she had stabbed him that day. That wound was originally layered. First it was bitten by her, and then it was stabbed by her jade hairpin. It had just formed a scab not long ago. When she was running around barefoot, he bent down to pick her up and it touched the wound. The wound seemed to have split open again. Xiahou Qing couldn't help but let out an "oh" sound, which was caught by Ning Shu. What's going on? She immediately stood up and reached out to pull at his clothes. I just told you not to throw yourself into a man's arms, but I didn't say you could take the initiative to take off a man's clothes. Xiahou Qing reached out to stop her, but she had already seen it. I want to, look. Ning Shu was very anxious and insisted on pulling open his collar. She first saw his collarbone and then a thick layer of gauze. The blood on the gauze was very dazzling. Ning Shu's eyes widened as she continued to pull open the gauze. She looked at the layers of ugly scars on his snow-white skin. How white his skin was how dazzling these scars were. Her eyes flickered. You're injured. Who is it? Hit him. Fragments of memories floated through her mind. There was the torrential rain that seemed to never stop and the dawn that seemed to never come. There were countless black shadows that pounced on her in her desperate struggle to break down. There was also the boundless fear and an embrace. Yes, an embrace. When she lost all her beliefs and rejected everything in the world, a person went against the current and hugged her, who was shivering in her shell, in his arms, and then, a hazy layer of water immediately appeared. She remembered now. That person was her. The person who had hurt him like this was her. Boundless guilt made her tear up. Her shoulders trembled, and she was at a loss. Hit. The hand that she had just stretched out was grabbed by him. He lowered his head gently and stroked her chin, wiping away the moisture on her face bit by bit. He smiled faintly. You don't have to hit her. She didn't do it on purpose. She just suffered a heavy injury and was too upset. Thus, she unknowingly hurt me. So don't hit her. You have to forgive her and love her, okay? Ning Shu shook her head. She still couldn't get past herself. But, no buts. On the contrary, I have to thank her. If it wasn't for her, how could you put down your guard against me and trust me wholeheartedly? As soon as his voice fell, she suddenly stood on her tiptoes. Her soft and warm lips gently pressed against the mottled scars. Chapter 499. Xiahou Qing was shocked and held her down. You. Ning Shu raised her head. Your saliva. It's for treatment. I'll lick it for you. 2 days ago, when Mr. Duan's waist injury flared up, he accidentally pricked his hand. That was what he did, so he must be right. Her voice was so clean, without any distracting thoughts. It was as clear as a creek. She had the mind of a child, but her body had already grown up. She was like a pomegranate fruit that was quietly condensing on the top of the tree, waiting for it to ripen. Even her gentle breath on the side of his neck was deliberately tickling the feathers on the tip of his heart. Xiahou Qing's hand was so tight that blue veins appeared on the back of his hand. A little bit of sweat seeped out from his temples. He raised his hand and wanted to pull her away, but his hand was already in the air and he finally put it down. Because, he couldn't bear to. The floating petals in the bathtub spun around, exuding a faint but seductive fragrance. Bright and warm rays of light leaped into the carved window patterns on all sides. The thin layer of gauze in the middle danced gently with the wind, sometimes light, sometimes heavy. Finally, they were all wrapped together in that layer of gauze. The two figures rose and fell, and finally stuck together. Through the crack of the door, several pairs of eyes quietly stared at them with relish. They were secretly delighted. Hong Fei covered her mouth and laughed, ha ha ha. Shi Yan, hey, hey, hey. Huimo, wow, wow, wow. Tianwen, tisk, tsk, tsk. Zigui's eyes were faintly filled with tears. Jiu Ci's face was stern and he ruthlessly took a bunch of people away. Huimo's neck was pinched and he said in pain, "Ah, ah, 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 gently, let me see again. Recently, so many bad things have happened. It's rare to see Lady Ning and Shitzi being so sweet." "You don't say." "Although Lady Ning's mind has regressed, I didn't expect that she would escape even more. May Shitzi is happy, ahaha." Huimo was laughing so hard that his eyes couldn't be seen. He saw Xiao Zhangping, who had been silent, lowered his head and silently turned away. He hurriedly shut up, waved to Shi Yan and the others, and followed. Xiao Zhangping walked very fast and disappeared as soon as he turned around. Huimo looked around for a long time but couldn't find him. Finally, he heard a suppressed cry behind a weeping willow. He scratched his head and walked over quietly. Looking at her face full of tears again, Huimo looked up and down but couldn't find a handkerchief. Just like last time, he sighed and stretched out his sleeve. "Your Highness, do you need my sleeve?" Seeing his pitiful appearance, Xiao Zhangping held back his tears and said angrily, "What are you doing here? Get lost, I don't want you to laugh at me." Huimo, huh? "Your Highness, how can you accuse me wrongly? How am I here to laugh at you? I'm clearly here to, what are you doing here? Say it." Huimo smacked his lips and said, "Forget it. You can think whatever you want. As long as you're happy. I can't be happy as long as you're here. Get lost." Huimo was very good-tempered. He shrugged and turned to leave. But behind him, Xiao Zhangping anxiously said, "Come back. Princess, didn't you tell me to scram because you don't want to see me? Why are you going back on your words?" Xiao Zhangping, I didn't call you because I want to see you. It's your sleeve. You said that you would give it to me, but I haven't used it yet. Give it to me. What are you waiting for? I order you to come back immediately." Huimo was amused. He walked back slowly and stretched out his hand to her. Xiao Zhangping held his hand and rubbed her tears and snot on his sleeve.